owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Puremont para Intratnamiento Wino Infringe de Recos de Originales. Los Direcos de la Novela y la Imagen son del otro original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 851 Mobika, Getting Married. Subscribe. Haha, Clean, you don't know, do you? Seeing Clean's puzzled look, old Aaron laughed and said proudly, "My ranch has been converted into a tourist ranch, and many tourists go there every day." "Oh? Tourist ranch?" Now, Clean's became interested. He didn't even want to go to the banquet hall. He dragged old Aaron to find a place to have a good chat. Fortunately, a figure organized them in time. "Hey, it's so cold, why don't you go in?" Old York, wrapped in a thick coat, staggered out of his pickup truck. It's still reliable to go out in this weather. Hearing the voice, Kinzu remembered that the two of them were still blocking the door of the banquet hall. "Well, let's go, let's talk first." Kinzu laughed and called the two to go in. Of course, he couldn't help but make an appointment with old Aaron. He really wanted to take a look at the so-called tourist ranch in a few days. Old York, who was standing by, listened to the conversation between the two and seemed to have thought of something. He smiled and said, "Clean, if I remember correctly, you should have a good golden beach. If you start a tourism business, I guess old Aaron will fight you to the death." Before Kinzu could speak, old Aaron beside him shouted, "Hey, old York, what do you mean by this? Am I the kind of person who only cares about money?" Old York nodded and answered very affirmatively, "Yes." Old Aaron was so angry that he looked at this guy with a glare. Kinzu estimated that if it wasn't for the wrong occasion, he would have rushed over. After talking and making a fuss, several people walked into the banquet hall together. In fact, it's not that Kinzu really doesn't like to attend banquets. From the first time he was in New York, he took the initiative to go to the bar, which showed that this guy was actually a sultry type. The reason why he doesn't like to attend banquets is because they are too boring. A large group of well-dressed guys get together to brag and see who brags the most. What's the point? Don't say there are no beauties. Even if there are many beauties, what can you do? So, after saying hello to Wesley, Kinzu took Dale to a corner and slowly tasted a glass of red wine. He was going to leave when the banquet was almost over. Old Aaron and old York shook their heads at Kinzu's behavior, expressing their incomprehension. But this is the good thing about foreigners. They won't pay too much attention to you. As long as you are fine, they won't interfere with what you do. It's not like in China, when you go out with friends, if you're in a bad mood, it will affect the mood of a lot of people. Just as Kinzu and Dale were chatting, they heard a very familiar voice behind them. "Hey, Clean, you cruel guy, you haven't come to see us for so long." Kinzu turned his head in surprise, but saw Mobika, who was wearing a denim outfit, holding on its arm and walking towards him. "Mobika, why are you here?" However, as soon as the voice fell, Kinzu wanted to give himself a big slap. Isn't this nonsense? Joseph was a chef after all, and he had a lot of connections in Revere. Why can't I come here? Mobika shook her head like a little girl, and acted like a spoiled child towards Kinzu. Now, Kinzu couldn't stand it. Looking at the two girls who seemed to be two beautiful flowers tonight, he felt a little itchy in his heart. But at this moment, a figure appeared, which scared Kinzu. "Ahem, Joseph, long time no see." Kinzu quickly extinguished the dirty thoughts in his mind and greeted Joseph, who was walking behind him, with a smile. "Yes, Clean, long time no see." He nodded. Although he concealed it well, Kinzu still read a few traces of sadness in his eyes. "What's wrong?" Kinzu saw this and asked with some concern. "Joseph, are you in trouble?" It would have been better if he didn't ask. When he asked this, Joseph immediately sighed deeply. Kinzu was about to continue asking questions, but he saw Mobika shaking her phone at him, then turned around and said, "Dad, Onid and I are going to take a look around. Go." Waving his hand helplessly, Joseph took a glass of champagne from the servant and drank it down with one gulp. "Hey, Joseph, what's wrong?" Seeing the two girls leave, Kinzu didn't have time to check his phone, and hurried to Joseph. After all, this is one of his future father-in-laws. But he knew that Kinzu was shocked by his words before he finished thinking. "Mobika is getting married, what?" "Mobika, she's getting married," Joseph said loudly, and took another glass of champagne, ready to get drunk. "No, wait. Kinzu was anxious now, and grabbed his hand that was about to pour the champagne, and asked, "Get married? You said Mobuka is getting married?" "Yes." Being caught by Kinzu, Joseph did not resist and obediently let go of his hand. "She's getting married. She's getting married. Why is she getting married?" Kinzu rubbed his head and asked in disbelief, "Who's the groom?" "Groom? Ha ha." Joseph let out a bitter laugh, leaned dejectedly on the sofa in the banquet hall, and pointed. "The groom is her." "Who?" Kinzu looked back, only to find that there were a bunch of people standing there, and many of them were still dancing. Onid, her senior. Onid. When Kinzu heard the name, he was still a little unresponsive. But then, the wine glass in his hand fell to the ground with a snap. Fortunately, at this time, music sounded in the banquet hall, covering up the sound. You mean, Mobuka is getting married, and the groom is Onid?" "No, not really." Joseph waved his hand, and just as Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief and was about to sit down, he said, "She is not the groom. It should be said that Mobuka is the groom. After all, this girl is a little stronger." Kinzu couldn't help but have several black lines on his forehead when he heard this. This is indeed the real father, who knows his daughter so well. However, Kinzu still couldn't believe that these two girls were getting married without telling him. Waving his hand, Kinzu called the waiter, and handed him 2 tips, indicating that he should clean up the wine glass he dropped. The waiter who took the tip moved quickly, and soon cleaned the floor and brought Kinzu another glass of the same red wine. Nodding, Kinzu took out another one and handed it over. After the waiter left, Kinzu waved directly at the 2 girls, indicating them to come over. But the 2 girls, who were usually obedient, were a little disobedient at this time and just slipped out. Mobuka, on the other hand, made a phone call gesture to Kinzu before leaving. Seeing this, Kinzu reacted a little. This girl wanted him to look at his phone. But after glancing at Joseph beside him, Kinzu felt a little uncomfortable. Poor parents in the world. If it was his own family, if Kinru told him that she wanted to marry a girl, Kinzu could make her obedient without the help of Kin's father and mother. So, he is now particularly moved that foreign children are happier. A new week, throwing a tantrum and asking for rewards and subscriptions to support. Chapter 852 Wedding. Mobuka, are you willing to marry Onid, live with her according to the teachings of the Bible, become one with her before God, love her, comfort her, respect her, protect her, as you love yourself? Whether she is sick or healthy, rich or poor, always be loyal to her until she leaves this world. Accompanied by the wedding march, in a European-style church in Revere, an old priest with grey hair looked at the 2 in front of him with a serious face. "Ah, women. Father Augustus is not young anymore, he is over 60 this year, and is the priest of a church in Revere. This church is located in the city of Revere. Although the area is not too large, he has to preside over the weddings of several couples every month. Even if he catches up with good days, he has presided over 8 weddings a day. But even so, he has never presided over the wedding of 2 women in his life. However, since the US government announced the legalization of same-sex marriage 2 years ago, this kind of thing is not too rare. Although some radical Catholics mobilized 320,000 churches across the United States to oppose the president's decision, Augustus was obviously not one of them. For him, as long as they were children of the Lord and did not clearly violate the rules set by the Lord, then everything was fine. Of course, including the 2 women who were about to get married. Mobuka, wearing a pure black straight suit, looked at Onid in front of him with deep affection, and said slowly and firmly, "I do." Augustus nodded, turned to look at Onid, who was wearing a white wedding dress and looked beautiful, and slowly asked, "Onid, are you willing to marry Mobuka, live with her according to the teachings of the Bible, and become one with him before God, love him, comfort him, respect him, and protect him, just as you love yourself? Whether she is sick or healthy, rich or poor, always be loyal to him until she leaves the world?" "I do." Onid nodded firmly and responded to Mobuka's gaze. Perhaps because of excitement, a strange blush surged on her fair face. The piano sounded melodiously, the flowers bloomed, and the solemn temple was brilliant and glorious. The wedding march was played fiercely, as if it had reached its peak at this moment, making people intoxicated. Augustus held the Bible in his hand and announced with a serious face, "According to the authority given to us by the Holy Bible, I declare you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man separate." Wow! As Augustus's voice fell, a warm applause rang out. No matter whether it was sincere or not, at this moment, everyone couldn't help but echo it. Perhaps because this wedding was special, not many people came to watch the ceremony. In addition to Joseph's family's relatives and friends, there were only a few nearby ranchers. Of course, Kinzu also came. He was standing in the audience at this moment, clapping his hands vigorously. However, the expression on his face was a little weird. It was hard to imagine that the woman who was still lingering with him in bed a few days ago was so affectionate at this time. So they are in this relationship. Looking at the two women on the stage, Zhu Wengyo's expression was a little excited. Kinzu couldn't help but have a few black lines on his forehead when he came back to his senses and saw the excited little face of the beautiful Zhu. I say, why are you so excited about this relationship? I'm excited. As everyone sat down, Zhu Wengyo's big eyes sparkled, and it seemed that there were little stars in them. This is the first time I have seen such a brave homosexual, so handsome. Kinzu was a little anxious when he heard it. What's the matter? This girl also has this tendency. Turning his head, he looked up and down, and warned very seriously. Be honest, dare to like women, be careful, I will deal with you. What? Zhu Wengyo was a little confused, and glared at Kinzu with a little amusement. Why would I like women? I just think it's a little novel, what are you thinking? That's good, that's good. Kinzu patted his chest in a pretentious manner, but there was a little disappointment in his heart. After leaving the church, everyone did not go to the hotel, but went directly back to Joseph's farm. For today's wedding, Kinzu pulled most of the restaurant's kitchen over. Well, the reason was that Chen Mu wanted to show his filial piety, and he couldn't stop him. Chen Mu was happy to take the blame for this. Even Joseph was very happy that he had accepted such an apprentice. As for Mobuka and Onid, they naturally understood Kinzu's intentions. On the night of their wedding, the three of them found an opportunity to roll together again. The clouds cleared and the rain stopped. Kinzu felt very comfortable stroking the smooth skin of the two girls. What are your plans for the future? Plans? Lying in Kinzu's arms, Mobuka drew circles on his increasingly strong chest with her little hands, and replied weakly, I haven't thought about it yet. Let's go on a honeymoon first. Yes. Onid also nodded and agreed. I want to travel around the world. I want to visit Britain, France, and Austria. Kinzu smiled and scratched her high nose bridge when he heard it. Okay, go ahead, have fun, I'll pay for all the expenses. Ah, really? Mobuka, who was originally weak, sat up all of a sudden, hugged Kinzu's arm and shook happily, not caring that she hadn't put on her clothes yet. That's great, the budget was a little tight, but now you don't have to worry. As she said that, she leaned over and kissed Kinzu's old face. Touching the wet feeling on his face, Kinzu smiled and hugged the two women tightly. You guys, you don't even want money when I give you money, what's there to be embarrassed about spending your man's money? TSK, that's different. Mobuka curled her lips in disdain for Kinzu's words. Every time I meet you, we go to bed. At the time, I feel like I'm selling myself when I take your money. Kinzu looked at the beauty in his arms speechlessly, and stretched out his hand, and heard two slaps. Why did you hit me? Covering her hips, Mobuka stared at him with big eyes in some grievance. I'll teach you to talk nonsense again, about whether it's for sale or not. Raising his palm, Kinzu threatened with a serious face. If you do it again, I will make you unable to get out of bed, believe it or not. Okay. Seeing Kinzu raised his palm again, Mobuka was so scared that she quickly reached out to grab it, and said helplessly, I know, I will never refuse in the future. Hearing this, Kinzu put down his hand and said with a smile, That's right, although I can't give you a name, it's still no problem to support you. Who wants your name? Turning over, Mobuka lay down again, muttering, My lover is on it, you are just a big bad guy, always forcing us. Chapter 853 Betty and Honey. In the early morning, when a ray of sunlight shone through the glass into the bedroom and spread on the carved wood floor, Kinzu knew. The heavy snow that had been falling for several days was finally over. After stretching lazily, Kinzu sat up with his back against the headboard, staring at the dazzling sunlight, but his mind was a little erratic. It had been a week since the weird wedding. Moreover, Mobuka and Onid, a couple who looked more like sisters than lovers, also started their own world travel with his financial support. It is said that after hearing about this, Onid's always strict old professor not only gave her sincere advice, but also generously gave her an unlimited vacation. Well, it's really an unlimited vacation, not a dismissal. It means that when you have enough fun, you can continue to come to work here. When Kinzu got the news, he still maliciously speculated that this old man might also be a gay. Of course, he didn't dare to say this guess. Otherwise, who knows whether on it, who was so touched, would kick him to the ground to make him have no offspring. Shaking his head, Kinzu got up to wash up, and then walked downstairs slowly with a master's step. Downstairs, Betty, who was looking down at the big apple in her arms, put down the apple quickly after hearing the voice, jumped up, and rushed towards Kinzu. Stop, stop. Bending down and grabbing the two round little ears, Kinzu pinched them gently and said with a smile, "You don't even know to wipe your mouth after eating. I learned it from you." Zumengyo, who was sitting on the sofa and reading a book, replied without raising her head. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu didn't bother to argue with the girl, and pulled Betty back to sit on the sofa again, stuffing the remaining half of the apple into her arms again. Who knew that Betty, who was just chewing happily, would be disgusted at this time, and her head kept nudging Kinzu's big hand. You don't want to eat it, right? If you don't want to eat it, I'll give it to them." Kinzu ignored it, took the apple, and pretended to throw it into the plates of Daha and Xiaohe. Although Betty couldn't stand it anymore, and sat on the ground, whimpering at Kinzu in grievance. You. Pointing at the chubby little head of this guy with his finger, Kinzu shook his head and sighed, "I can't do anything about you." Although helpless, looking at the little guy who seemed to have been wronged, Kinzu still stood up and walked towards the kitchen. It's Kinzu's fault. He was bored that day and happened to see Betty chewing an apple. Suddenly, he thought of brown bears who love honey, right? So he didn't think much about it, scooped a spoonful of honey and spread it on its big apple. Betty was stunned for a while, sniffed it with her little nose, and then, under Kinzu's stunned gaze, she finished the apple that usually took her half a day to chew in a few bites. Not only that, after it finished eating, it kept smacking its lips, licking the pair of bare paws that had just taken the apple until they were shiny. From that day on, whenever this guy saw Kinzu, he would cling to him, regardless of whether he was eating or not, and would not let him go. "What do you mean by you?" The beautiful Zhu, who was sitting on the sofa, raised her head, rolled her eyes at this guy with resentment, and muttered, "It's all your fault. He was such a well-behaved little bear before, but now he's almost become an addict because of you." This, Kinzu shrugged helplessly after putting half an apple covered with honey on Betty's plate. How would I know that this guy would be attracted to honey as if he saw a beautiful woman, and couldn't take his eyes off it? Yeah. Zumengyo nodded in agreement, and said with a hint of meaning, "They say that there are pets and there are masters of them. What do you think? What do you think?" Rolling his eyes, Kinzu pretended to be stupid and said something, and then sat down next to her. "Why, what book are you reading?" She glared at him charmingly, and Zumengyo didn't pester him anymore, but put the book in Kinzu's hand. "Sayu assigned Xiaohe the homework, and this girl didn't know how to do it, so she came to ask me." "Xiaohe's homework?" Kinzu looked around and asked in confusion. "Since it's her homework, where is she? What do you want to do?" Reaching out and pushing Kinzu's arm, Zumengyo said with some amusement. "She thought about it for a long time, and I asked her to go out for some fresh air. Looking at your expression, you seem like you want to be an adult." "No way." Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu smiled awkwardly. "I'm worried about your studies. If you don't study hard, what will you do in school? I think Xiaohe is pretty good, at least better than you were before, right?" As she spoke, Zumengyo seemed to think of the poor English of this guy in the company, and couldn't help but giggle. Kinzu was embarrassed by the laughter. He put down the study materials in his hand, put his arms around the soft waist of the beautiful Zhu, and moved his hands up and down. "I asked you to laugh again, will you laugh again, will you laugh again?" Giggle, 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 no. Being suddenly attacked, feeling the itchy feeling on her body, the beautiful Zhu couldn't help giggling non-stop. The two of them were having a good time here, and Betty was eating happily on the side. The only unhappy ones were the brothers Daha and Dao. There was no way. Although they also ate fruits, they didn't like them too much. Moreover, they didn't like the sweet honey, so now they could only watch Betty eating crazily in boredom. It is said that hunger is contagious, but it is not true. What is contagious is the appetite caused by watching people eating. The little guys now were like this. They were not hungry after breakfast, but when they saw Betty eating, they couldn't help but smack their lips, as if they had been hungry for decades. But now Kinzu is very strict with them. They don't have food to eat until it's time to eat. The brothers looked at each other and turned their heads to the door in tacit understanding. What's the old saying? Out of sight, out of mind, that's it. Just as the guys left the villa, Keen ran running, and when she saw the two people on the sofa in dishevel, she screamed. Covering her eyes with both hands, Keen faced the two people on the sofa and shouted excitedly, "Brother, you continue, I didn't see anything." Disturbed by the scream, Keen immediately stopped and helped the breathless beauty Zhu up. After Zhu and Gyo sat down, Keen finally had time to turn his head and look at this little girl who was a bit of a spoiler. He felt helpless. "Yes, you didn't see anything, that's because I didn't do anything." "What could you see?" "The gaps between your fingers are bigger than your eyes. If you really did something, I guarantee you would have seen everything." Chapter 854 Joseph's Request. After sending his troublesome little sister to do homework, Keen took Zhu and Gyo, whose face was still a little flushed, out of the villa. Don't get me wrong, this flush was not because Keen did anything bad, it was purely because of the excessive exercise just now. "Uncle, come quickly." As soon as he walked out of the villa, Keen saw Tongton and Lily riding ponies outside, and little Jack who came to join in the fun. Keen first waved to the two little guys, and then looked at little Jack riding on the back of Snowflake with a smile on his face. "Hey, Jack, how come you have time to come to my place today?" Jack, who was wearing a small cowboy hat, took off his cowboy hat politely and put it on his chest after seeing Keen's and said with a smile, "Uncle Keen, I'm here to play with Tongton and Lily, do you welcome me?" Especially when talking about Tongton and Lily, the little guy still used Chinese, although it was a bit awkward, but the meaning was still audible. Of course you are welcome." Keen walked over with a smile, patted the little guy on the shoulder, and asked, "Have you taught them to ride horses? They admire you very much." "Of course." The little guy puffed out his chest and said seriously, "I will definitely teach them to ride horses." Hearing this, Keen turned his head to look at Tongton and Lily not far away, and waved. "How about it, two little troublemakers, learn to ride horses from Brother Jack?" When the two little guys heard it, they immediately nodded excitedly. Keen said that they admired little Jack, and this was not nonsense. Since seeing little Jack riding a pony, the two little guys have become his loyal fans. There is no way Joseph's own family raises horses, and little Jack has been playing on horseback since he was a child. Although it is a bit difficult for him to ride a big horse now, he is a first-class level when riding a pony. After seeing a few little guys go to the ranch to ride horses at Eva's call, Keen continued to move forward. He knew that little Jack would definitely not come here alone. It's such a long way, even if little Jack really knows him, Joseph can't let him run around. Sure enough, next to a vegetable greenhouse, Keen saw Joseph, his parents and sister. "What's wrong? Why are you all here?" Walking forward, Keen smiled and greeted Joseph, then he got close to his parents and asked curiously, "Don't interrupt." Unexpectedly, Keen's mother interrupted her son very rudely, looking at Joseph seriously, waiting for him to continue. What is this?" Keen was a little embarrassed, and couldn't help looking at his father for help. Fortunately, Keen's father was not as serious as Keen's mother. Although his eyes were still staring at Joseph in the greenhouse, he responded, "Joseph is teaching us how to grow vegetables and how to choose ingredients." Keen was sweating when he heard this. "You are not going to learn cooking, why listen to this? Besides, why learn to grow vegetables? Although there are still a few acres of vegetable plots at home, it is not worth your seriousness." At this time, Joseph in the venue also saw Keen, smiled and put down a small green vegetable in his hand, clapped his hands, and said with a smile, "Okay, let's stop here today." Our boss Keen finally got up. As soon as the voice fell, several murderous eyes looked over, and the meaning was very clear. Why don't you go to bed to join in the fun?" Being stared at by so many eyes, Keen couldn't help but shrink his neck. Just when he wanted to ask his wife for help, he was very sad to find that the beautiful Zhu, who had just been holding his arm, had quietly held Keen's mother's arm at this time. "Well, I have something else to do, Joseph, let's go over here." In a hurry, Keen caught a glimpse of Joseph with a smile on his face, and quickly pulled him to the side. "Hey, Keen, why are you running so fast?" After running a few steps, Joseph, who was seriously oversized, stopped a little breathlessly. "No, nothing." Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, Keen was very curious. What did this guy say that made so many people listen so fascinated? "By the way, Joseph, you came here so early, what's the matter?" After stopping, Keen looked at the bearded man beside him and asked with some doubt. "Nothing serious." Hearing Qin Zhu's question, Joseph, who was still a little out of breath, immediately held his breath and was now preparing to speak. Sure enough, when Qin Zhu was silent, he heard Joseph ask, Qin, I heard that you were going to open many stores. Stores? Qin Zhu didn't come back to his senses for a while, and repeated it with some doubts. Yes. Joseph nodded, I heard from Chen that you were going to open a chain of catering groups. Oh, you mean restaurants? Qin Zhu nodded suddenly. Yes, it is this plan. Isn't this asking Chen Mu to help me choose a location? What's the matter? Qin Zhu looked at Joseph with some doubt. Could it be that this guy has another store to recommend him to buy? But then, Joseph's words dispelled Qin Zhu's idea. It's like this, I wonder if you are still short of manpower? Rubbing his hands, Joseph looked at Qin Zhu with some expectation. Yes, very short. Qin Zhu got a little excited. Could it be that this guy wanted to introduce talent to him? Come to think of it, it makes sense. After all, he has been a chef for so many years, and he must know a lot of people in all aspects. The more Qin Zhu thought about it, the more excited he became. How could he forget about this? Just as he looked at Joseph with some expectation, waiting for him to introduce a few helpers, he heard Joseph say with a smile, Qin, in this case, I wonder if I can help you work. Although I am a little old, I am still very strong. Ah? Qin Zhu's jaw almost dropped when he heard this. What's going on? Did he hear it right? Qin, I'm serious. Joseph's expression became serious. Why? Qin Zhu's expression also became serious. This matter is simply too strange. Is Joseph short of money? Although his family is not rich, they are definitely not short of money. Apart from other things, his monthly pension alone is enough for his family to live a carefree life. In addition, his own ranch can still produce every month. How could he be short of money? Maybe he can't take out 18 million at a time, but when it comes to being short of money, that's impossible. Since he is not short of money, why does he want to help him at this time? Is he impatient to stay at home and can't stay idle? Qin Zhu thought about it, but he couldn't figure it out. He couldn't help but look at Joseph again, wanting to hear his explanation. Thank you for the reward from Amateur Buddha, thank you for your support. Chapter 855 Joseph's joining. It's very simple. Joseph shrugged and said helplessly, because I once had such a dream, to own a restaurant group of my own, with stores all over Europe and America, and even out of America and set foot on the mainland. Then what? Qin Zhu listened to it with some fascination, and asked involuntarily. Then? Joseph spread his hands. Then it's like this now. Qin Zhu wiped the sweat off his face and looked at this guy a little embarrassedly. Is there no process? As if he noticed Qin Zhu's thoughts, Joseph also showed a trace of embarrassment on his face, explaining. My boss was too conservative at the time, and didn't give me room to play at all. Qin Zhu understood that this guy's dream was really a dream. It was just the kind of thing he thought about in his mind. Joseph, have you really decided to come out to work? After a moment of hesitation, Qin Zhu decided to ask clearly. If this guy really wants to come out to work, he has no reason to refuse him. Not to mention that he is Chen Mu's master and a former Michelin 3-star chef. Just his connections alone can make his career go smoothly. It is said that it is easy to meet the king of hell, but difficult to deal with the little devils. Although he knows many big people, it is really not worth bothering them for such a trivial matter. Of course, I came here so early, but I didn't mean to joke with you. Joseph's expression was very serious. Qin Zhu looked at him for a while and nodded slowly. Okay, since you are willing to yield, Joseph, then I'm honored to welcome you to join. Boss, I'm also honored to work with you. Seeing Qin Zhu nodded, Joseph laughed and went forward to hug him hard. Qin Zhu did not dodge, but reached out and patted his back. After letting go, he smiled and asked, So, when can you come to work? Anytime. Touching his chin, Qin Zhu pondered for a moment, nodded, and said, How about this, Joseph, you go and get familiar with Chen Mu for a few days, and then take over his current job. Joseph was a little embarrassed. What does it mean? Is this asking him to compete with his apprentice for a job? Seeing this, Qin Zhu smiled and waved his hands. Joseph, don't get me wrong. I plan to let you be in charge of our brand store in the future, and Chen Mu will be responsible for the preparation of opening a new store. Boss, I can also be responsible for opening a new store. Joseph was a little unhappy. It was obvious that opening a new store would be a tiring job. He took over the brand store and asked the original person in charge to open a new store. It felt like bullying. Joseph, don't be unconvinced. Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu patted his belly that was comparable to that of a pregnant woman in a teasing manner. Now I ask you to run around everywhere, are you willing, and is it willing? After hearing what Kinzu said, Joseph looked down at his waistline and sighed helplessly. If I had known, I would have paid attention to it. Now it's really a bit troublesome. Ha, this shows that you were a good cook. Kinzu was amused by his appearance and laughed, and said in a somewhat sly way, just look at your body shape, and you can tell how good your cooking is. Otherwise, how could you take care of yourself so well? Boss, you're right. Being teased by Kinzu, Joseph was not angry. He laughed twice and returned to the topic, saying, in this case, I will go to follow Chenmu to adapt for a few days. Kinzu nodded, but still worriedly advised, Joseph, you can go to work, but you must take care of your health, otherwise Mobuka will be angry with me. It would have been better if he didn't say it. When talking about Mobuka, Joseph's face, which was originally full of smiles, immediately became a little bitter. Sighing deeply, Joseph looked at Kinzu and shook his head. I thought you two could get together, but who knew this kid? Sighing and shaking his head, it can be seen that Joseph was really disappointed. However, Kinzu now kept his mouth shut and dared not say a word. What if this guy knew that he had harmed not only his daughter, but also his daughter's woman? I wonder if this guy would welcome him with a kitchen knife or a shotgun. Thinking of the consequences, Kinzu shuddered and hurried to join the main force. Although it was a big danger there, at least for the sake of his biological child, there should be no danger to his life, right? Thinking of this, Kinzu came to the villa, but found that the situation here was also a bit chaotic. Several little guys didn't ride horses, especially Lady, who was squatting on the ground with his knees hugged and crying. King's mother and father were beside him, saying something non-stop, but they didn't get any response. What's wrong? Kinzu walked up and asked curiously. Before anyone else could speak, little Jack came over with an apologetic look on his face. Uncle Keen, it's my fault. I didn't take good care of my brother. No, it's none of your business. After listening to the translation, Keen-wan waved her hands and explained to Kinzu with a smile. Nothing, Lady Lei was not honest when riding a horse. He wanted to learn to be cool like Jack, and he fell off the horse. Her smile was not a big deal, but Keen's mother, who was comforting her precious grandson, was immediately unhappy. Is there a mother like you? You didn't even come to see your child when he fell. I'm coming. Shrugging her shoulders, Keen-wan made a helpless expression to Kinzu, and quickly came to Lei and asked with concern, how is it, where did you fall? Does it hurt? Seeing this, Kinzu comforted little Jack for a few words and followed him. By the time Kinzu came, Lady Lei had stopped crying. He broke free from Keen's mother's support and said with a hint of tears in his tone, it's okay, Grandma, it's just a little skin break, it doesn't hurt. What do you mean it doesn't hurt? Look at you, you're bleeding. It really doesn't hurt. Looking at the stubborn look of his little nephew, Kinzu smiled with relief, stepped forward and encouraged. Not bad, Lady Lei is worthy at being a little man. Come on, Uncle will take you to apply medicine. After being praised by Kinzu, Lady Lei's little face also showed a smile. He wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes with his hand and still said, Uncle, it's okay, it doesn't hurt. Kinzu smiled and picked up the little guy, looked at the broken skin on his knee, and bleeding, and couldn't help saying, I know it doesn't hurt, but let's still apply some medicine. It will be bad if the wound gets infected. Yes. Keen's mother followed behind, muttering to herself, and Keen-wan couldn't help rolling her eyes. It's just a child bumping into something, what's the big deal? I remember getting hurt a lot when I was a kid, why didn't my mom care about me that much? Am I not her biological child? Chapter 856 Preparing to go to the ranch. The next day, when Kinzu was still eating breakfast, he received a call from Chenmu. Boss, what's going on? Why did my master come to help me? On the other end of the phone, Chenmu was a little amused. Isn't this nonsense? If someone spreads it, will he still have face? Calm down. Kinzu chewed the fried dough sticks and said vaguely, he just follows you to adapt to the work for a few days, and then he will take over your management of the brand store. Chenmu was a little confused. Is he masturbating? Before he asked, Kinzu had swallowed the last fried dough stick, drank a sip of milk, and explained with a smile. Your master has taken over your job, and then you can open a new store for me with peace of mind. Chen Mu took a long breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead, feeling a little depressed. Can't you breathe heavily when you talk? People scare people to death, do you know? Although he complained in his heart, Chen Mu still smiled and complimented him. Boss, you're really amazing. Many restaurants wanted to invite my master to come out before, but he ignored them. Really? So hard to invite? Qin Zhu was happy when he heard it, thinking that it was hard to invite others, but it was hard to refuse him. He came here on his own initiative. The two chatted for a while, and after Qin Zhu instructed them about the arrangements for the two, he hung up the phone. You're really busy. You keep getting calls early in the morning. Qin's mother, who was at the other end of the table, glared at Qin Zhu with some complaints while helping Tongton and Lily roll up the pancakes. Qin Zhu had no way to deal with Qin's mother's temper, and could only bear it in shame. He knew that the old lady was still angry. There was no way, because her little grandson was injured, but no one took it seriously. Even Lily himself, after Qin Zhu gave him medicine, he ran off to ride a horse again. In response, Qin's mother transferred all her anger to Qin Zhu, and from yesterday to now, she has been talking about him whenever she has time. Seeing Qin Zhu being humiliated, Qin Wan and Qin Ru, who were sitting next to him, laughed unkindly. While Qin's mother was in the kitchen, Qin Ru reached out and picked up a freshly made pancake, rolled some beef in it, and handed it to Qin Zhu. Come on, brother, hold on. Reaching out to take the pancake, Qin Zhu took a big bite and scolded unhappily. Little girl, have you finished your homework? Go and do your homework. Qin Ru pouted, shrugged, stood up, and showed a helpless expression on her face. Alas, people's hearts are not the same as they used to be. After saying that, she ran into the study without waiting for Qin Zhu to react. This damn girl. Staring at the little girl's back, Qin Zhu was a little amused. After dinner, Qin Wan cleaned the table with her mother in the house. Her brother-in-law and father discussed today's arrangements in the living room, and Qin Zhu walked out of the villa alone. When passing by the porch, the white tiger squinted his eyes, raised his head and saw that it was Qin Zhu, then lowered his head again, as if he was sleeping. Qin Zhu was a little puzzled when he saw this. Why didn't those who should hibernate, and those who shouldn't hibernate were so lazy every day? Take the brown bear at home for example, shouldn't it go to sleep in the winter to reduce the consumption of the body? But what about it? It jumps around every day, and has no intention of hibernating at all. Not to mention dieting in winter, even its appetite is getting bigger and bigger. Sighing, Qin Zhu put his hands behind his back and walked out of the villa swayingly. The four little guys following behind saw Qin Zhu walking swayingly, and they also tried to walk like him. What was the result? Either you bump into me or I bump into you. Anyway, after walking for dozens of meters, I almost lost my life. Qin Zhu didn't know this. After walking out of the villa, he looked up at the sky. Well, the sky is blue and clear, just like a clear spring. And the sun is nice, it feels warm on my body, it's really a good day to go out and play. Seeing this, Qin Zhu stopped, turned around and went back. Now, the little guys who followed him out were dumbfounded. What's going on? Back at the villa, Qin Zhu looked at his father and brother-in-law in the living room, as well as his mother and sister who were cleaning up the mess, as well as Zhu Mengyu and Eva, and asked with a smile, "Shall we go out and play today?" Okay. Before they could say anything, they heard Tongton and Lily shouting in unison. Ignoring the cries of the two little guys, Qin's father put down the teacup in his hand and asked with a smile, "What are the plans for today?" Qin Zhu smiled and explained, "Let's go to a ranch not far from here to play." As soon as the voice fell, the few people who were still looking forward to it lost interest in an instant. Qin's mother asked directly, "Is our ranch not big enough or what? Why go to someone else's ranch?" "Mom, wait for me to finish." Qin Zhu looked at his mother with some depression and explained, "Their ranch is different from ours. His ranch has been transformed and is now open to tourists." "Ah, there is such a ranch?" Qin Wan looked at Qin Zhu with some surprise and asked, "How to transform it? Then they don't raise cattle and sheep. How could it be?" Qin Zhu heard the words and smiled and waved his hand. "Their ranch is very large. The area converted into this kind of tourist ranch does not take up much space." Now, the interest of several people was raised, and they all said they could go and have a look. Since everyone had decided, Qin Zhu took out his mobile phone and called old Aaron. When he learned that Qin Zhu's family was going to play, old Aaron decided to clear the place to welcome Qin Zhu's family. In response, Kinzu waved his hands again and again. Old Aaron, I don't dare to go if you say so. There is no need to clear the place. Just arrange it better for us. Ha ha, no problem. Old Aaron laughed heartily, and then said, in this case, I will wait for you at the ranch. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu looked at the few people and said with a smile, hurry up, pack up, I will arrange a car. Arranging a car is actually just making 2 calls to the female bodyguards. Because although it is sunny outside, the snow on the ground is not so easy to melt. So, for safety reasons, under Dale's suggestion, Kinzu decided to drive 2 Ford 750s this time. When Wayne and Dyer drove 2 pickup trucks and stopped in front of the villa, everyone in the house had almost packed up. First of all, King's father and mother, Kinzu arranged for them to take a car with his sister and brother-in-law. As for the rest of the people, forget about it, just get them all in the car first. Fortunately, there were not many people left, and a pickup truck was more than enough to fit them all. Just when Kinzu was about to leave, he found out to his great pain that there were still a few people following him. Chapter 857. Take it with you, take them all with you. This, Kinzu scratched his head as he stared at the little tails behind him. Everyone was out, so it wasn't appropriate to leave them alone at home. Brother, why don't you take them all? Kinzu looked at her brother eagerly, wanting to take the little guys over to play together. Kinzu nodded, and said nothing. With a wave of his hand, Dale went down and picked up the guys who were having fun one by one. Kinzu was immediately excited when she saw this, and she grabbed her and started touching it up and down regardless of its struggle. Ahem, a very innocent touch. Kinzu glanced at Daha and looked at him with some sympathy. Let you take the lead in making trouble, now you know the consequences, right? Just when he was about to ask someone to drive, he saw another figure appear at the gate of the villa and growled at the car. Oh my god, why is this guy here? Looking at the white tiger with bright eyes behind the gate, Kinzu held his head and said with a headache, take this too. This, Dale did not act immediately this time, but became a little hesitant. You asked her to kill the white tiger, and she could do it without saying a word. But you asked her to get this guy into the car. Boss, you should do it yourself. Kinzu pouted and didn't bother with this girl. He pushed open the car door and walked down. Come here, jump up from here. Opening the door of the villa, Kinzu pointed to the back of the pickup truck, indicating that the white tiger should go up by himself. Brother, aren't you making it difficult for it? Before the white tiger moved, Kinzu stood up for it in the car, pouting and saying, how can it get up so high? However, before she finished her words, the white tiger took a few steps back and started running towards the pickup truck. In the blink of an eye, before everyone could come to their senses, they saw the white tiger approaching. Without any pause, the white tiger's limbs suddenly exerted force, and its nearly 3-meter-long body flew into the air and landed lightly on the back of the pickup truck. Even the people sitting in the car didn't feel the car vibrate. Oh my god. This time it was not Kinzu, but Kinzu who had just been defending the white tiger. She opened her mouth in surprise, looked at the white tiger, and then looked at the height of the pickup truck. She swallowed her saliva involuntarily and said with some stammering, brother, after the founding of that country, it is not allowed to become a spirit. What spirit? It's just that it has a good physique. After opening the door and getting in the car, Kinzu glared at his little sister unhappily. He thought to himself that this girl was not good at studying, but how could she have such a rich imagination? Indeed, this guy's waist strength is very good. Dale, who witnessed everything, praised sincerely. Okay, let's go quickly, people are still waiting. Kinzu waved his hand and quickly changed the subject. He must not let these guys think that they have become spirits. Otherwise, some sensei will probably come out to exorcise demons. But what surprised Kinzu was that he said he was going to set off, but Dale still didn't move. Just when he was about to ask a question, he saw Dale turned around and asked awkwardly, Boss, how should we go? Kinzu was a little confused. You ask me how to go? I haven't been there before, how can I know how to go? Needless to say, Kinzu quickly took out his mobile phone and called Old York. He estimated that only Old York could recognize the way, even Old Aaron himself probably didn't know how to go. Who told him that he had never been here before? Under the guidance of Old York, Kinzu stumbled all the way and finally found the destination. Before getting off the car, Kinzu found that this place was different from his own. There were a lot of people at the door. At the gate of his ranch, besides the 2 bodyguards, the most common ones are reindeer and other small animals coming and going. But here, not only are there a constant flow of people, but there are also many cars coming in and out. Sitting in the car, Kinzu looked around and took out his phone to show it to old Aaron. Although his ranch is smaller than his own, it is not something that can be visited in a short time. If he gets lost, it will be embarrassing. After talking to him and hanging up the phone, not long after, a convoy drove in at the gate to the ranch, well, a sightseeing convoy. Old Aaron was the first to be seen. He was wearing a black coat, standing in the car, and constantly waving at the people passing by. If Kinzu hadn't known this guy, he would have thought that it was the leader of some country who came. Seeing that everyone had arrived at the door, Kinzu quickly opened the car door and got out of the car, standing under the car and waving at the convoy. In fact, Aaron noticed them without Kinzu getting out of the car. There was nothing else, 2 Ford 750s, which are really not something that ordinary people can afford. Besides, there are many people who can afford it, but he won't be able to use it if he buys it. So when Aaron saw the 2 sturdy cars, he was sure that it must be Kinzu's family. Sure enough, he just ordered the convoy to go over, and saw Kinzu push open the car door and get out. "Ha, Clean, you are finally here. I have been waiting for you for a while." As soon as the convoy stopped, Aaron jumped down with a big laugh and gave Kinzu a bear hug. Kinzu didn't react much to this. He was used to the Americans' hospitality. But the white tiger in the back truck was not happy. "Good guy, you dare to sneak attack my master in front of your brother tiger." With its 2 front paws on the edge of the car, the white tiger raised its head and roared. If it hadn't been prepared, it would have pounced down at this moment. Even if it hadn't pounced down yet, this roar really caused a commotion at the gate. "What? There's a tiger. This is surprise." Where? This is courageous." "Look, over there, is this a tiger?" This is someone who saw a white tiger but couldn't tell if it was a tiger or not. Clean, what is this?" Old Aaron was well informed after all, and although his voice was a little trembling, he hadn't turned around and ran away. Misunderstanding. Kinzu first waved at the white tiger, and then explained a little embarrassedly. "Old Aaron, don't be afraid, this is my pet." "Pet?" Aaron expressed some doubts. Can a pet have such a bad temper? "Of course, a pet." Kinzu nodded affirmatively, walked over and opened the tailgate of the pickup truck to scare it. Amid a burst of exclamations, the white tiger shook its head, jumped down from the back, and stepped lightly on the ground. "Good physique." Old Aaron, who was watching from the side, suddenly brightened up. "Clean, your tiger is very strong." "That's for sure." Kinzu laughed and called the white tiger over. He touched its big head and said with a smile, "Don't be naughty today. We're out here to play." Chapter 858 The Power of the White Tiger. After the commotion at the door calmed down a bit, Kinzu took the white tiger and got on the tour bus with everyone else. However, because the white tiger was too big to be carried on the seat, it could only stand at the connection between the driver's seat and the seat. The young man driving the tour bus almost cried. "Brother, I won't let you play with people like this, okay? Can you keep its big mouth away from my neck?" Kinzu happened to be sitting next to the white tiger. Seeing that the hands of the white young man driving the car were shaking, he smiled and comforted him. "Don't be afraid, buddy, it's very good and won't bite." As he said that, for fear that he didn't believe it, Kinzu also let the white tiger rub him with its big head. The white young man, who was a little scared, couldn't sit still anymore and ran away with a shiver. Ahem, old Aaron's face was a little embarrassed. He glared at the white youth and scolded, "Bernie, you coward, can it eat you?" After a long time of comforting, the timid white guy trembled and sat in the driver's seat, driving the tour bus to the ranch. However, from time to time, the tour bus would run around. Seeing this, Aaron shook his head helplessly and explained with a wry smile. "Clean, there is no way, these guys are ordinary workers, and they've not had much contact with these guys." "I see." Kinzu nodded with relief after hearing this. He said it. If a cowboy is scared like this by a tiger, then he will not be far from getting out. A real cowboy, even if he doesn't have a gun in his hand, will not be scared like this by a tiger. What's more, it's a pet tiger. When the tour bus drove into the ranch, Kinzu realized that old Aaron was really willing to spend money. The ranch was crisscrossed with white concrete roads. Kinzu even saw several large squares, but he didn't know what they were used for. As he walked in, old Aaron was also introducing them. "This is the milk house, that is the horse riding field, and there is a shooting range over there." Kinzu was dazzled by all the things he saw. Old Aaron, your place is really good. Retracting his gaze, Kinzu pushed the door and got out of the car, saying with some sigh, if you add a few large amusement facilities, your place can be compared with Disneyland. How is it possible? Old Aaron heard this and waved his hand with a smile. Clean, don't praise me anymore. It's good enough for me to have 1/3 of theirs. Kinzu smiled and said nothing more. He followed old Aaron and wandered around this rather large amusement park. Along the way, whenever Kinru saw an interesting amusement project, she would pull her sister to play, leaving Kinzu and Li Jianhua here to watch the two little guys. There was no way, they were too young to play those exciting things. Besides, Kin's father and mother were too old to go fooling around with them. After waiting until they reached a very lively place, old Aaron looked at the two pouting little guys and said with a smile, Clean, this place is very suitable for two little cutties to play, do you want to go and have a look? Oh? Walking down, Kinzu saw a lot of people gathered not far away, and immediately became interested. Old Aaron, what is this? It's so lively. Ha, this is a game. Old Aaron smiled mysteriously and led everyone to gather around. Although there were quite a few people, with the white tiger leading the way, everyone still came in smoothly. However, the scene in front of them made everyone a little stunned. Brother, what are they doing? It's so weird. Looking at the blonde and blue-eyed children staggering in the fence, and the sheep crawling on the ground and shivering, Kinru was very surprised. This, probably a fall. Kinzu scratched his head, he was a little confused. Old Aaron, who was standing by, looked at the situation in the field, then looked at the white tiger, seemed to understand something, and said with a bit of a smile, Clean, can you let your little baby leave for a while? Kinzu looked down and saw the white tiger was standing outside the fence, staring at the poor lambs inside with a pair of meaningful eyes. Go away. He waved his hand at the white tiger with some amusement, signaling it to stand behind. Seeing this, the white tiger waved its big tail, smacked its bloody mouth with some pity, and moved behind that few people. Away from the white tiger's gaze, the sheep with black faces, black ears, black noses, and black legs in the field stood up tremblingly. At this time, the crowd of onlookers noticed the white tiger, and after a cry of surprise, they all stayed away from them. Hey, guys. Kinzu raised his hands helplessly and gestured repeatedly. Don't get me wrong, it's very docile and will never hurt anyone. I don't believe you. Although no one said it directly, the look in everyone's eyes revealed this meaning. Why? Think about the performance of the lambs just now. However, unlike the adults, the little guys in the fence did not cry or make a fuss after they stood up. Instead, they lay on the edge of the fence and stared at the white tiger not far away, chattering and discussing there. A white boy with short hair pointed at the white tiger and whispered to a little girl next to him. Hi, Gina, am I seeing right, it's a tiger? The little girl nodded excitedly and said with some joy. Yes, it's so big, bigger than the one I saw in the zoo last time. At this time, a chubby little black boy next to him came over and muttered disdainfully. What's wrong with the tiger? I also saw an orangutan last time. Oh? The white girl turned her head in surprise. Cartai, where did you see it? On TV, ... Listening to the chat of the little guys, Kinzu's mouth twitched a little. Don't you know what fear is? Hi. Old Aaron couldn't stand it anymore, so he stood up and clapped his hands. After attracting the attention of several children, he smiled and said, Dear little angels, we are still competing. No, Grandpa Aaron, we don't want to compete. The white little girl obviously knew Aaron. After he finished speaking, she pouted and said, We want to play with the big tiger, we don't want to compete. Oh, God, this won't do. Before Aaron could say anything, a plump white woman rushed over and said anxiously, Gina, you can't make trouble, let's go back quickly. Si estás escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significa lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 859 Black-nosed Sheep. No, Mom, I want to see the big tiger. The little girl was a little reluctant and started to act like a spoiled child. The white woman was obviously helpless, staring at her daughter in the fence, wondering what she was thinking. Ahem, Mrs. Caller. Old Aaron coughed twice and explained awkwardly. This tiger is really a pet, very docile. Look how well behaved it is now. Mrs. Caller looked in the direction of the sound and saw the white tiger nestling on the grass not far away, with its big head resting on its front paws basking in the sun, and it seemed to be feeling a little lazy. Really? Although she believed it a little, she asked again with uncertainty. Absolutely true. Raising a few fingers, old Aaron patted his chest and promised. As for why he didn't raise one palm? Nonsense, he just saw this guy for the first time today, how could he swear casually? It can be seen that when those businessmen pat their chests to promise, they are usually unsure and are cheering themselves up. The purpose of this is to make themselves more confident in what they say. Well, that's it. No matter how Kinzu criticized old Aaron in his heart, Mrs. Caller believed it at this time. She hesitated and stepped back, leaving the space for old Aaron and the children. Seeing this, the other parents who were ready to move stopped. After all, the children paid money to enter this fence. If they came out without playing anything, wouldn't it be a big loss? Children, do you all want to see the big tiger? Looking at the little kids who nodded in front of him, old Aaron had a smug smile on his face and said in a bewitching voice, "In this case, the little champion of our competition today will have the opportunity to take a photo of the big tiger, okay?" Hearing this, the white little girl Gina opened her eyes in surprise and asked impatiently, "Grandpa Aaron, are you serious?" "Yes, can we really take a photo of the big tiger?" "Of course." Old Aaron nodded affirmatively. Now, a few sparks flashed between the little guys who were very close just now. "Brian, the championship must be mine." "No, the championship must be mine." "Carl Ty, do you want to be beaten?" Old Aaron saw that the guys were getting a little out of control and hurriedly announced loudly, "Hey, guys, if anyone doesn't follow the rules of the game, they will be eliminated directly." Hearing what old Aaron said, Brian raised his little fist, looked at the white tiger not far away, and put his little fist down again with some resentment. He didn't want to be eliminated directly. "Brother, what are they doing? What kind of competition?" Seeing Kinro at the side, she still didn't understand and looked at her brother with a puzzled look. "This should be wrestling, right?" Like his sister, Kinzu looked for a long time and didn't understand what was going on. However, he didn't want to lose face in front of his sister, so he simply picked an answer that he thought was the most correct. However, when the little guys walked in front of the sheep and turned over and rode on them, Kinzu was a little dumbfounded. "Brother, are they going to wrestle on sheep?" Kinru looked at Kinzu's embarrassed face with a strange look in her eyes. "I thought you knew everything, but it turns out there are things you don't know." This, Kinzu touched his nose, embarrassed, and simply started to cheat. He glared at his sister and scolded her pretentiously. "Why are you asking so many questions? Just watch it." "HMPH, if you don't want to ask, then don't ask." Kinru curled her lips, snorted lightly, turned her head and looked at the situation on the field with great interest. At this moment, several little guys were riding on a sheep with a black face, black ears, black nose, and black legs, lined up in a row, as if they were preparing for a race. Kinzu just thought of this, and saw a staff member in the fence holding a small pistol in his hand, and fired a shot at the sky. In an instant, fireworks flew, and several lambs also carried the little guys on their backs and ran to the other side not far away. It looked like they had rehearsed it, their movements were in perfect unison, and there was no sign of unfamiliarity. "Old Aaron, what is this?" Kinzu couldn't help himself, so he pulled over old Aaron, who was watching the situation on the field with a smile, and asked in confusion. "Ha, Clean, this is a special project here." Turning around, old Aaron's expression seemed very proud, and even his two small mustaches were twitching. "You mean, riding sheep to race?" "Of course." Old Aaron nodded, pointed to the sheep in the field, and asked with a smile, "Clean, do you think these sheep are special?" "Yes, they are a little special." Kinzu nodded, looking at the sheep on the field, except for the white fluffy wool, the rest are all black, and asked curiously, "Dying like this, it's not sheep, right?" "What?" Old Aaron was a little stunned. "What did you say?" "Dyed." "I say, go ahead. It's not cheap to dye the hair of these guys like this." Kinzu thought that this guy really didn't hear him clearly, so he couldn't help but repeat it again. "This, I really haven't dyed it before." The corner of his mouth twitched, and old Aaron looked at Kinzu with some suspicion. "Are you really a rancher?" "Not dyed." "It's definitely not dyed." Then, Kinzu hesitated a little. He also felt that he, as a rancher, seemed to be a bit incompetent. "This is a black-nosed sheep from Switzerland." Black-nosed sheep. Yes. Old Aaron nodded and introduced with a smile. Black-nosed sheep originated in the Valais region of Switzerland, and their earliest survival can be traced back to 1400 BC. Their most obvious features are black faces, black ears, black noses, and black legs. However, the rest of their hair is white and fluffy, which looks cute and very popular. Is this why you raise them? Qinzhou said, pointing to the lambs that had stopped running in the fence. It seemed that they had already decided the winner. Of course there's more to it than that. Shrugging his shoulders, old Aaron said with a smile, I'm not such a spendthrift. The main reason these sheep are here is to attract tourists. Their greatest value is their wool. That's right, it looks like there's a lot of wool. Qinzhou agreed with this. Just looking at the lambs, it was worth it. The wool on their bodies was fluffy and hung down long. Old Aaron also nodded, and walked towards the fence while smiling. Although they are not too big, each Black sheep can produce up to 4 kilograms of wool per year. Chapter 860 Little Gentleman. When Qinzhou followed old Aaron to the periphery of the competition venue, the result of the competition was already announced. Is it correct? Holding the result of the competition, old Aaron's face was a little surprised. What's wrong? Qinzhou approached with some curiosity. Clean, look, Gina actually won. After handing the result of the competition to Qinzhou, old Aaron seemed to have figured out something and made a sound of admiration. She won? Qinzhou was also a little stunned when he heard it. Although the two of them were chatting just now, they could clearly see that the little girl Gina was at the end. Harry, what's going on? Old Aaron looked directly at the referee just now, who was also a staff member of the ranch. Ha, boss, you'd never guess it. Harry looked at the little boys not far away who looked a little depressed, and said jokingly, these little guys, at such a young age, have gentlemanly manners and they just stopped the running black-nosed sheep. There's even this. Qinzhou couldn't help laughing. These little guys really had a lot of tricks up their sleeves. Judging from the way they looked at the white tiger from time to time, these guys definitely wanted to get close to it. But now they actually resisted the desire in their hearts and gave this opportunity to the little girl. Shaking his head, Qinzhou didn't want to disappoint the little gentleman, so he smiled at old Aaron and said, forget it, let them take a photo together. That's fine. Old Aaron nodded indifferently, but his eyes couldn't help but look at the white tiger not far away, and asked with some envy, Clean, how did you train this guy? Can you help me train one? I'm afraid not. Qinzhou shook his head decisively. The reason why this guy is so obedient is that I saved their lives. If it was someone else, they would not recognize me. Is that so? It's really a pity. With a sigh of regret, old Aaron did not mention this topic again, but took the little guys to take a group photo. After old Aaron left, Harry looked at Tomten and Lily not far away, and asked Qinzhou with a smile, Mr. Clean, do you want them to come over and try? Of course. Qinzhou waved at the two little guys and said with a smile, come here quickly, Uncle will take you to ride the lamb. Hearing this, the two little guys who were already eager to try, did not care about the worries of Keen's father and mother, and ran over in a flash. Uncle, can you really ride a lamb? Yes, lambs are so cute, why don't you have one? Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, Qinzhou said with a bit of a smile. Little girl, how can Uncle have everything? These are specially raised by the ranch. Okay, go in quickly. As he said that, Qinzhou motioned the two little guys to go into the fence. Tomten didn't bother much, and followed Harry inside very obediently. This time, they were accompanied by 3 other little guys, 1 boy and 2 girls, all dressed cutely. After seeing 2 Chinese faces coming around, a girl who looked a little older took the initiative to stretch out her hand. Hello, my name is Chris, what's your name? Tomten and Lily shook hands with the other party blankly, but they were a little confused. What the hell is this guy talking about? Helplessly, they could only look at Qinzhou outside the fence for help. Shrugging his shoulders, Qinzhou couldn't help but wonder if he should let the 2 little guys stop learning English in advance. Hi, beautiful Chris, I'm sorry they don't understand English. Okay. The little girl smiled sweetly, nodded at the 2, and said nothing. Seeing this, Harry smiled and stepped forward to teach the little guys how to ride on the lamb. The process was very short, and the ending was already determined. When Tomten and Lily came back with excited faces, Qinzhou felt a strange feeling in his heart. Damn, looking at your excited looks, if you don't know, you are the champions. But, come out to play, have fun is the most important thing. After going around, time passed quickly, and it was already morning in a short while. At this time, they just came to a snack square, and old Aaron suggested with a smile, "Clean, do you want to eat something? The beef here is also very authentic." Looking at the two little guys holding their stomachs beside him, Kinzu smiled and nodded. "Okay, let's eat here." Just as they found a place to sit down, the white tiger came in and sat down at Kinzu's feet. Suddenly, the air was quiet for a few seconds, and then a burst of discussion broke out. "Look, that's the tiger, it's really big." "Yeah, I heard it's very obedient, should we go up and take a look?" "Really? Will it be dangerous?" "It shouldn't be." Look, they all went over. After Kinzu sent Dale and Erica to buy food, he looked at the group of people who gathered around him helplessly, clapped his hands, stood up with a smile and said, "Guys, it doesn't like too many people. If there is any danger, please take care of yourself." As soon as the voice fell, the white tiger stood up in cooperation, bared its teeth, and caused another round of exclamations. However, the effect was still very obvious. After the white tiger stood up, the surroundings immediately returned to calm, and everyone dared to hide far away and take pictures. "Ha ha, Clean, you'll probably become famous again if you do this." "What can I do?" Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu said that he was helpless. If he had known it would be like this, he would not have taken this guy out. Old Aaron smiled, looked around, and whispered to Kinzu, "Clean, let's go over there and talk." Kinzu looked at him with some doubts, but still nodded very readily. "Yo, you stay here with Mom, and old Aaron and I will go over there to talk." After whispering to Zoom and Gyo beside him, Kinzu got up and followed old Aaron to an empty seat not far away and sat down. "What are they going to do?" Kin's father turned around, but did not find his son's figure, and asked in surprise. "It should be some business to discuss, Uncle. Let's eat first." Zoom and Gyo said with a smile, and took the snacks bought from Dale's hand and helped Kin's father and mother to put them in front of them. "You're so busy that you don't even have time to eat." She shook her head helplessly. Seeing that Zoom and Gyo herself hadn't eaten yet, Kin's mother, who felt sorry for her future daughter-in-law, hurriedly said, "Yo, stop being busy. Come sit down and eat with us." Chapter 861 Old Aaron's Invitation. "What's wrong, Old Aaron? What's the matter?" After sitting down, Kinzu smiled and picked up a glass of juice brought by Erica. Looking at the serious-looking white old man opposite him, he was very confused. When this guy invited him to come over so enthusiastically, Kinzu knew that this guy must have something to do. However, after thinking about it for so long, he still couldn't figure out what it was. Want money? He didn't lack money. Want people? He didn't know many people. Just when Kinzu was lost in thought, the old Aaron across from him took a sip of coffee and asked with a smile, "Clean, what do you think of my place?" "Very good." Coming back to his senses, Kinzu looked at the bustling crowd around him with a smile, and said with emotion, "I guess all the people in Revere have come here." "No, Clean, you're wrong." Old Aaron shook his head and said with a smile, "The fewest people come from Revere, because they are tired of coming here. These tourists are from Boston. They just take advantage of the weekend to relax." "Is that so?" Kinzu nodded thoughtfully and put down the juice in his hand. "In that case, there are not many customers on weekdays?" "Yes." Old Aaron sighed a little disappointedly, stirred the coffee on the table, and looked at Kinzu with some hopeful eyes. "Clean, do you know where the most people who come here are from?" "Where?" "China." Looking up in astonishment, Kinzu seemed to understand a little. "This guy wants me to attract tourists for him." Sure enough, old Aaron waved his hands excitedly and said excitedly, "Clean, do you know? I did the statistics a few days ago. Among the tourists who come to the ranch every month, more than 50% are from China. Moreover, these friends from China account for 70% of the ranch's consumption power. Is this so amazing?" Kinzu was also a little stunned. Have the local tyrants in our great China gathered to this extent? It must be right. Old Aaron nodded seriously. "This is the conclusion drawn by the professional investigation company I invited after more than a month of careful investigation." "What do you mean?" Kinzu decided not to play dumb anymore and simply asked his doubts directly. "Clean, you should understand." Old Aaron suddenly laughed and lowered his head to stir the coffee in his cup. "This kind of thing is beneficial to both of us, isn't it? But I don't have such connections in China." Kinzu shrugged helplessly. Although he was also very tempted, this was the reality. Perhaps, in the eyes of these foreigners, since he is so rich, he must have a huge influence in China. But one's own family knows one's own business. His connections in China are not even as good as those of an ordinary white-collar worker. No, at least he knows Fatty Wang, right? Thinking of Fatty Wang, Qin Zhu vaguely remembered that this guy seemed to ask him for help with something. Qin, are you not interested? Hearing Qin Zhu's words, old Aaron was a little disappointed and unwilling. He sorted out his thoughts and stretched out 3 fingers. Well, Qin, as long as you can help me attract more Chinese tourists, I will give you 30% of the shares. I'm sorry. Qin Zhu smacked his lips with some regret. 30% of the shares, this is a lot of small money. However, thinking of the few people he knew in China, Qin Zhu still shook his head helplessly. Old Aaron, maybe you don't know that it's not easy to go abroad in China, not to mention that it's even more troublesome to organize those people to go abroad. Unable to explain the situation truthfully, Qin Zhu had to fool around as much as he could, saying that the difficulty of this matter was harder than going to the moon. Is it so difficult? Old Aaron was a little skeptical about this. Didn't he hear those Chinese people say that it was difficult to go abroad? Of course it's true. If you don't believe it, you can ask other people. Qin Zhu nodded seriously. He didn't feel any psychological pressure when fooling foreigners. Anyway, he didn't believe that this guy could really catch someone and ask. Sure enough, old Aaron shrugged helplessly, ended the topic, and started talking about something else. After a while, after lunch, Qin Zhu and his friends went to play in the ranch again. And old Aaron didn't seem to be affected at all, and he accompanied them to stroll without any abnormality. Until the evening, when he sent a few people out, he hugged Qin Zhu again and said with a smile, Qin, if you have any ideas in this regard, you must contact me in time. Qin Zhu was sweating. It seems that this guy has always thought that he is not interested. Is he stupid? With green US dollars in front of him, how can I not be interested? But at this time, he couldn't say anything, so he could only nod helplessly. On the way back in the car, Zhu Wenguo leaned on Qin Zhu, rubbed her aching calves, and asked curiously, Husband, you look like a money grubber. What did the fat old man say to you today? What? A money grubber face? Qin Zhu pointed at his face and gestured exaggeratedly. Such a handsome face, how can you look like a money grubber? Poochie, amused by Qin Zhu's funny look, Zhu Wenguo stretched out her hands and pinched him gently. I don't feel that he is so handsome, but he is really thick-skinned. Rolling his eyes, Qin Zhu stopped making fun of it, holding the beautiful woman's hands, smiling and briefly telling the story. Is that so? After hearing this, Zhu Wenguo pondered for a moment, chuckled and said, Why don't you agree to it? Such a good thing, isn't it, giving us money? You. Qin Zhu was a little amused, stretched out his hand and pinched the delicate face of the beautiful Zhu. It's not my wife's turn to do this little money is not worth it. Of course he knew that for such a small matter, he only needed to pay a little money, find a good management talent, and then Zhu Wenguo would say something, and it would be done. But just as Qin Zhu said just now, it's not worth it, it's not worth it. Although 30% of the shares seem to be a lot, how much benefit can it generate every year? 1 million? 3 million? Or 10 million? For such a small amount of money, he would have to use her family's relationship, unless Qin Zhu was stupid. Okay, I'll listen to you. Zhu Wenguo chuckled and snuggled into Qin Zhu's arms. She didn't understand this. It's just that she felt a little distressed when she saw Qin Zhu's expression just now, so she said so. At this moment, seeing Qin Zhu's decisive refusal, a bright smile appeared on her face, just like the peach blossoms blooming in March, especially beautiful. Chapter 862 Sudden News. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, it has been almost a month since Qin's father and mother came to the United States. On this day, when Qin Zhu was about to take his parents to travel around the United States, he was interrupted by a sudden news. What? You want to go back? Qin Zhu, who had already packed his luggage, was confused after hearing his father's words. What's going on? Yes, we must go back, and we have to go back quickly. Qin's father shook his head helplessly. It turned out that one of Qin's mother's aunts had not been in good health. After enduring such a severe winter, she did not survive until the spring when the flowers bloomed. She had been issued several critical illness notices by the hospital. Alas, if you don't go back quickly, you might not even be able to see her for the last time. While packing the luggage in her hands, Qin's mother urged without raising her head. Xiao Zhu, hurry up and book 2 tickets for us. We'll leave today. Here, let me see. Helplessly putting down the luggage in his hands, Kinzu took out the phone from his pocket. Just as he was about to dial, he heard his sister say, "Since you want to book tickets, book ours as well." Her. Kinzu looked at Kinwan in surprise, not understanding what she meant. "I've been out for so long, it's time to go back, and my great-aunt was very kind to me when I was a child. I also want to go back and see her." Her. Hearing this, Kinzu asked curiously, "Sister, do you know this great-aunt too?" "Of course." Kinwan nodded, with a hint of sadness in her expression. "When we were young, we often went to my great-aunt's house to play, don't you remember?" "This, I seem to have some impression." Kinzu scratched his head a little embarrassedly. However, that expression made it clear that this guy was just talking nonsense. He was still young at the time. What does he remember? Kin's father waved his hand and helped Kinzu at the critical moment, so that he didn't bear the reputation of being ungrateful. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this. To be honest, he really had no impression of this great-aunt. But since his sister said so, he had to go back. Shaking his head, after answering Jennifer's call, Kinzu asked directly, "Is there any flight to China today?" "The flight will be in an hour." Jennifer on the other end of the microphone gritted her teeth and thought to herself, "Can't you be gentler?" Although she was itching with hatred in her heart, she still quickly checked the flight information. After a moment, she reported in her sweet voice, "Mr. Clean, a Boeing 777 will take off in an hour and a half. Do you want to?" Before she finished speaking, she was interrupted by Kinzu. "That's all, hurry up." Kinzu hung up the phone without waiting for Jennifer to react. He had a lot of things to do now. This damn guy, don't let me get him. Jennifer clenched her fist and endured for a long time, but finally didn't throw the phone in her hand. However, she felt that if she continued like this, her endocrine system would be out of balance. Achoo. Kinzu, who was packing his luggage, suddenly sneezed and rubbed his nose. This guy was still muttering in his heart. "Who the hell is thinking about me again? Mom, do I have to go back too?" When Kinru learned that she could not go out for a trip but had to return to China, her little face was full of bitter expressions. "You?" Mother Kin looked at her little daughter, hesitated for a moment, and shook her head. "Since you were going to study here anyway, just stay with your brother to avoid causing trouble when you go back." Kinru, who was very happy to hear the first half of the sentence, suddenly became a little depressed after hearing the second half. In her mother's eyes, she is the one who only causes trouble. Although she was depressed, she opened her mouth but did not dare to refute. There was no way, she was in the fresh period now, how could she bear to go back? After settling the family affairs and kissing goodbye to the beautiful ladies Kinzu and his friends got on the helicopter and flew directly to New York from the sky. As for the little guys at home, Kinzu believed that with the help of the beautiful ladies and the little witch Kinru, suppressing a few little guys would be a piece of cake. Soon, the helicopter stopped near the airport. After Kinzu and his party got off the car, they walked straight to the airport lobby. Fortunately, there was no delay on the way. It was still half an hour before the takeoff time until they boarded the plane. No words along the way. After more than 10 hours of flight, the passenger plane finally landed safely at the capital airport at around 9 o'clock in the morning of the same day. After getting off the plane, Kinzu and his companions did not stop, and did not even leave the airport. They directly changed to a small private plane and quickly rushed to Jiangnan. It was not until they got on this small private plane that Kinzu felt that his little secretary seemed to be quite useful. After more than an hour of flight, before 10 o'clock in the afternoon, the plane landed safely at Jiangnan Airport. Leading several people to walk outside the airport, Kinzu seemed to remember something and turned his head to ask, "Mom, do you know which hospital it is?" "Yes." Kin's mother nodded. "I said on the phone that it is in Jiangnan City First Hospital. That's all." Kinzu stopped, wait for a taxi, and said with a smile, "Then let's find a hotel near the hospital to settle down first, and then go to visit." Kin's mother also nodded in agreement when she heard this. It was indeed not suitable for her and her companions to visit the patient with so many bags. After taking 3 taxis, Kinzu and his companions, guided by the map, arrived at the entrance of a hotel that looked very high-end. There were only 7 people, so why did they need 3 cars? Nonsense, they brought 4 female bodyguards. After entering the hotel, Kinzu directly opened 4 large suites and walked to the room under the guidance of the waiter. When he arrived at the door, Kinzu looked at the time and said with a smile, How about this, Mom? You will take a rest, and we will go there in the afternoon. Is that so? That's fine. Although Keen's mother was very anxious, after such a long flight, she also felt that she was about to fall apart, so she could only give in helplessly. Keen Wan and Li Jianhua had no objection to this. After everyone agreed on the time, they went back to their rooms to rest. Well, Dale was in the same room with Keen Zhu. No one else noticed this. Even Keen Zhu himself only realized that something was wrong after Dale walked in. After putting the suitcase away, Keen Zhu lay down on the bed and exhaled very comfortably. But at this moment, he felt something behind him. Turning back, he saw Dale standing behind him. He seemed a little confused. Dale, what are you doing? Me? Pointing at herself, Dale shrugged expressionlessly. Close protection, you don't even know that. I didn't get anything from the annual meeting today, and I was scolded for the whole afternoon. I have a headache. Chapter 863. Encounter in the hospital. Originally, they were going to rest for a few hours in the hotel and go to the hospital as soon as they got up. But because of the long flight, Keen's mother was a little tired and her spirits seemed very depressed. Although seeing patients is very important, you can't joke about your own health. Finally, after Keen Zhu's decision, go eat something and sleep first, and go tomorrow. Early the next morning, when everyone gathered in the restaurant, Keen Zhu nodded with relief. Mom, that's right. If you went like that yesterday, the doctor would have to take you for a checkup. Keen's mother, who was a little heavy-hearted, did not change because of her son's joke, and her face was still a little serious. Keen Zhu and his sister looked at each other and shrugged helplessly. It seems that the mother really cares about this aunt. Because they were worried that the children would make some noise, after breakfast, they left their brother-in-law Li Jianhua and the two guys waiting in the hotel, and the rest of them took a taxi to the First People's Hospital of Jiangnan City. When they arrived at the hospital entrance, everyone got off the car, but Keen's mother hesitated, as if she didn't dare to face it. Okay, maybe it will be okay, let's go. Keen's father sighed and took the lead to walk inside. After entering the hospital, they asked at the nurse's desk and found the ward. Just when they were about to push the door to go in, a haggard but tall girl walked out. When he saw the girl's appearance clearly, Keen Zhu shouted in surprise. Yang Yi? Her. Hearing the voice, the girl who was walking with her head down realized that there were a few more people in front of her. However, because there were so many people, when she raised her head, she didn't notice Keen Zhu at the first time, but just felt that the people in front of her looked familiar. Here. Keen Zhu, who was standing at the back, raised his hand. Keen Zhu. This time, Yang Yi finally saw it clearly, and one jade hand involuntarily covered her mouth. She never thought that she was still talking about this man with her mother just now, and this man immediately appeared in front of her. Yes, it's me. Keen Zhu nodded at her, and seeing the puzzled look from Keen's mother, he couldn't help but explain. Mom, this is my classmate, you go in first. Keen's mother didn't say anything after hearing this, and nodded to the girl in front of her, then pushed the door and walked in. After Keen's mother and the others entered the ward, Keen Zhu gestured to the windowsill not far away, and the two walked to the windowsill at the entrance. Why are you here? Are you feeling unwell? Looking at his former crush who looked a little dazed in front of him, Keen Zhu touched his nose and looked at her tall figure with some worry in his eyes. Yes, it was indeed a worried look, Keen Zhu swore. However, in Yang Yi's opinion, Keen Zhu's look was a little presumptuous. With a slight blush on his face, Yang Yi lowered his head in embarrassment and whispered, My mother is sick, I'm here to accompany her. Keen Zhu heard this, and then he withdrew his gaze with relief, and he also understood the reason why this girl borrowed money a few days ago. How is Auntie's health? What's wrong with her? Acute renal failure, now it's stabilized, waiting for a kidney transplant. Have you found a kidney source? No, the hospital is still matching, and they said they will notify us when there is news. Hearing this, Keen Zhu frowned slightly. Waiting for the hospital to match? Then when do we have to wait? There are so many people who need kidney transplants every day, but there are only a few kidney sources. If we don't think of a way, the queue will be too long. But now is not the time to talk about these. He looked at the ward not far away and said, How about this, let's have lunch together at noon. I still have to go see the patients now. Yang Yi nodded, but asked curiously, Is that old lady your relative? Yes, my mother's aunt. Keen Zhu nodded slightly, and said with some emotion, I didn't expect that you two could live together. This is really something. Before he finished speaking, Qinzu felt something was wrong and quickly stopped talking. Although he didn't say it, Yang Yi already understood what he meant, and couldn't help rolling her eyes at him. Can this also be described as fate? Whoever wants this kind of fate can have it, but she doesn't want it anyway. Hey, well, I'll go first, remember to have lunch. Touching his nose awkwardly, Qinzu laughed twice and hurried to the ward. Behind him, Yang Yi couldn't help but curl at the corners of her mouth as she looked at Qinzu, who was fleeing in panic. She thought that after Qinzu had money, he would be like those rich people on TV and start to look down on his old classmates, but she didn't expect him to be so approachable. However, what she didn't know was that Qinzu was more than just approachable. After entering the ward, he stood aside obediently and watched Qin's mother crying loudly. He didn't dare to say a word, just like a bullied young wife. However, he really didn't have any impression of this great aunt, so he had to stand aside. This ward is a standard triple room. In addition to the great aunt, there was also a middle-aged woman lying on the bed next to her. Qinzu glanced over unconsciously, thinking that it was no wonder that Yang Yi had been so beautiful since she was a child. It turned out that it was really genetic. Although she already had a daughter that old, this woman looked less than 40 years old. Her face was a little pale, but there were no wrinkles. It was just a little strange that, unlike the large group of people around the bed of this great aunt, Qinzu did not see the presence of a caregiver around the bed of this middle-aged woman. Could it be that Yang Yi was the only one accompanying her mother? Xiaozu, come out. While Qin's mother was thinking, she suddenly waved at him. After following his mother out of the ward and sitting on the rest chair next to him, Qin's mother choked up and said, Xiaozu, go and see, change a separate ward for your great aunt. Qinzu nodded, said nothing, and walked straight to the hospital lobby. He understood what Qin's mother meant. The environment of the multi-person ward was indeed not very good, and looking at the great aunt's current condition, it was estimated that she really couldn't hold on for a few days. Even when he was in the ward just now, he heard that the doctor suggested that they go home and wait. It's just that neither the children nor the relatives are willing to give up this last glimmer of hope. Perhaps, they also know that these are useless efforts. But their attitude is still very firm, cure. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, even if they can only live one more day, they must let the old man live one more day. In this regard, Qinzu said that he was very pleased, and he also had a lot of good feelings for these relatives who were not very familiar with him. There are very few children like this now. Really, they are 1,000,000 times better than those children who were afraid that the old man will not die once he is critically ill. Maybe some people will say that life is bound to die, and the old man can die earlier without suffering so much. It's easy to say this, but have you ever thought about the feelings of the old man? Even ants are greedy for life, let alone people. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, how can you give up easily? When you came to this world naked, who worked hard to raise you? When you caught a cold and had a fever, who guarded you day and night? It's them, your parents, the people who love you the most in this life. Chapter 864 Change in wards. Arriving at the hospital lobby downstairs, Qinzu quickly arranged a separate ward for his great-aunt. Of course, he also arranged one for Yang Yi's mother. He was always happy to do such favors. Yes, really. Arriving upstairs, Qinzu did not rush to the ward, but asked the head nurse, and followed his instructions to find his great-aunt's attending doctor. Who are you? In the attending doctor's office, a middle-aged doctor who looked to be in his 40s raised his head from a pile of medical records. Based on this first impression, Qinzu was sure that this doctor was at least not a guy who was just sitting there doing nothing. With this conclusion, Qinzu was relieved, stated his identity, and directly handed over a check. The middle-aged doctor, who was confused about the situation, took it subconsciously, and when he found out it was a check, it was too late. Especially when he saw the number on it clearly, the attending doctor's eyes suddenly widened. Hey, Mr. Clean, what is this for? The attending physician, who had only received a few thousand yuan in red envelopes, stuttered when faced with this 100,000 yuan check. Qinzu did not mean to laugh at him. His expression was a little serious. He glanced at his name tag and said sincerely, Dr. Zhen, I don't mean anything else. I just hope you can help my great-aunt with her treatment. I think you should understand our feelings as family members. I understand. I understand your feelings very well. Dr. Zhen nodded, and his expression became serious. Mr. Clean, don't worry, I will do my best. Qinzu nodded, and when Dr. Zhen was about to leave, he asked again. By the way, Dr. Zhen, I remember that the bed next to you was also your patient, right? Yes. Dr. Zhang nodded slightly, looked at Qin Zhu with some surprise, and said, "That is a patient waiting for a kidney source for a kidney transplant." "What's the matter, Mr. Qin? Do you know her?" "Yes, she is the mother of one of my classmates." Qin Zhu did not deny it, staring into Dr. Zhang's eyes, and asked, "I wonder if Dr. Zhang can help keep an eye on the kidney source. If there is a suitable kidney source, there will be a generous reward." This. Hearing what Qin Zhu said, Dr. Zhang's breathing became rapid. There will be a generous reward. How much? He didn't know. But he was sure that it would definitely be more than the one in his pocket. "Okay, Mr. Qin, I will definitely keep an eye on it for you and tell you as soon as there is news." After getting the answer he wanted, Qin Zhu walked out of the office with satisfaction and walked towards the ward. As soon as he arrived at the door of the ward, he saw several nurses pushing 2 carts, also coming here. Seeing this, Qin Zhu quickly pushed open the door of the ward and walked in. Just as he was about to speak, he saw a beautiful figure beside Qin's mother. "You're back." Nodding to Yang Ye, Qin Zhu didn't hesitate, turned his head and looked at Qin's mother who was still wiping chairs, and said, "Mom, the nurse is here, you should accompany her aunt to another ward first." Qin's mother nodded when she heard this, and her eyes left the old man on the bed and looked at the 2 men standing beside her who looked to be in their 30s and had a simple face. "Zikang, Ziyun, come and help, I asked them to prepare a single ward, let's go over there." "Hey, sister, there's no need to be so troublesome, we're fine here." "What's this? Just change it if I ask you to." Okay. The 2 men seemed to be in awe of their mother's niece, and after hearing what Qin's mother said, they didn't refute it. They started to pack up. Seeing this, Yang Ye was about to help pack together, but was pulled back by Qin Zhu. "You go pack your things, too. I'll change a single room for you." "Oh, no, really?" Yang Ye was a little dazed when she heard this. While she was touched in her heart, she also felt a little panic. She owed him enough. When would she be able to pay him back? At this time, the nurse had already pushed the cart in. Qin Zhu didn't care about the ink and said directly in a strong tone, "Stop talking nonsense and pack your things quickly." It's strange to say that many women are like this. They clearly say no, but once the man becomes strong, they will accept it silently. Yang Ye is the same. When Qin Zhu ordered him to pack his things in a strong way, she didn't know why, but she went obediently. It was not until she was halfway through that she suddenly realized what was wrong with her. However, looking at the things that had been almost packed, she didn't say anything and continued to pack her things silently. But Yang's mother, who was lying on the bed, looked at her daughter and Qin Zhu with a complicated look. Yang's mother also saw the scene of Qin Zhu and Yang Ye talking just now, and she had many guesses about the identity of this big boy. In particular, seeing her daughter listening to a man now, Yang's mother had a bad feeling in her heart. Thinking about her daughter's abnormal behavior a few days ago and the inexplicable extra surgery fee, she wanted to ask clearly now. However, in front of so many people, she resisted asking. As for her son, when did such a beautiful female classmate appear again, Qin's mother didn't care at all. After changing the room, he was sent out to avoid so many people crowding in the ward. Qin Zhu looked at the ceiling and was very speechless. However, looking at Qin's father and sister beside him, his mood was somewhat balanced. "Well, even my father was kicked out, what did I count?" He said hello to his father and sister, asked them to go back to the hotel to rest first, and then he patted his butt and walked into a ward next to him. This is Yang's mother's ward. However, when Qin Zhu walked into the ward, he felt that the air here was a bit oppressive. It was so oppressive that it made him feel a little scared. Especially when Yang Ye saw him, her eyes lit up, which made Qin Zhu want to turn around and run. As soon as he stopped, Qin Zhu saw Yang Ye standing up from the bed and rushing over, and he was so scared that he quickly took 2 steps back. "Well, Yang Ye, what do you want to do?" As if she was cast a spell of immobilization, Yang Ye's steps just stopped immediately. Looking at Qin Zhu's frightened expression in front of her, a few black lines appeared on her forehead. "Qin Zhu, stop making trouble, come over and explain to my mother, we have nothing to do with each other." "Nothing to do with each other?" Qin Zhu looked at Yang Ye with an expression as if he was looking at a fool, thinking that this girl was stupid. "We're obviously old classmates, how can we have nothing to do with each other?" Chapter 865. A bloody blunder. Next to the First People's Hospital of Jiangnan City, in a branded Western restaurant, a young man and woman sat opposite each other in a relatively remote corner, staring at each other. If someone unfamiliar with this scene saw them, they would definitely think that they were a couple who had a quarrel. Scratching his head, Qinzu was the first to give in under Yang's burning gaze. He spread his hands and said helplessly, well, I really didn't mean it just now. Who knows? Seeing that Qinzu had given in, Yang retracted her gaze, rubbed her sore eyes, and muttered unhappily, it's all right now. How can you let me go back to see my mother? This, Qinzu smiled awkwardly for a long time after hearing this, but there was nothing he could do. It was strange, when Yang asked him to explain that they had no relationship, Qinzu blurted out. Who said we had no relationship? Originally, he meant that they were old classmates. But the bad thing was that before he could finish the next sentence, the phone on his body rang, and it was a long-distance call from Chen Mu. Helplessly, he had to greet the stunned Yang, reminding her not to forget to have lunch together, and then took the phone out to answer the phone. It didn't matter that he left, but Yang's mother was unwilling, and she pulled Yang to question her. Moreover, she didn't believe her daughter's explanation. What a joke! Just because of the relationship of an old classmate, can someone lend you so much money casually? Although Yang would never admit it, Yang's mother still defined her daughter in her heart. Being kept by someone. When she thought that her daughter would go down this path because of her illness, Yang's mother was so sad that she couldn't stop crying. After she cried like this, Yang could no longer sit still and hurriedly tried to comfort her. But it was useless to comfort her. Yang's mother had already determined this fact in her heart, and no matter what Yang said, it was useless. In the end, there was really no other way. She couldn't find Qinzu and she went out, and she was on the phone all the time. Yang had to lie and say that Qinzu was her boyfriend. You're still laughing. Yang, who was feeling depressed, looked up and saw the arc of Qinzu's mouth, and her little universe suddenly exploded. She didn't care that this was a public place, and she stood up and rushed towards the hateful man. Why didn't you call at any other time? Why did you come at the time? Why didn't you say something else? Why did you have to say such an ambiguous sentence? The more she thought about it, the angrier she became, and the more she thought about it, the more ashamed she became. Yang didn't care about her image this time, and stretched out a slender jade hand to grab Qinzu's clothes, and her little fist rained down on him. It's just a pity that Qinzu's expression changed from being stunned at the beginning to enjoying it slowly. Let alone a weak woman like her, even if a 1.8-meter tall strong man came, Qinzu would not feel much pain after a punch. Physical fitness several times that of ordinary people is no joke. So, at noon, in a famous Western restaurant in Jiangnan, such a weird scene appeared. A tall girl grabbed a young man's clothes and slapped him with her small hands. And what about the man? Well, harder, yes, here too. Qinzu squinted his eyes, and the arc of his mouth became bigger and bigger. Finally, he couldn't help laughing. Ah, you bastard, I'll fight you. Yang was so embarrassed and annoyed by Qinzu's repeated provocations. There are only a few ways for women to fight. Seeing that using hands didn't work, Yang didn't use her hands this time. She just pounced on him and prepared to bite him. Hey, you were born in the year of the dog, don't bite. Qinzu was really panicked, and hurriedly reached out to help the girl up. Looking at her current state, if she was really bitten, she might bleed. Ah, bastard, you hooligan, big pervert. With a scream, Yang, whose little face turned blood red, immediately fled from Qinzu, and stretched out a little hand to point at Qinzu tremblingly. How could you do this? Be good, don't make trouble, come and sit down, everyone is looking at you. Qinzu did not answer Yang's words, but stood up, smiled apologetically at the people around, and then motioned her to come back and do it quickly. After being reminded by Qinzu, Yang was also suddenly shocked that the two of them were still in a public place. On her pretty face, which was already red as blood, a few more red clouds appeared in an instant, and now even her neck became a little red. The waiter in the distance heard the noise and wanted to come over to see what was going on, but saw this and did not come over. Qinzu, you've gone too far. After sorting out her emotions, Yang opened her beautiful eyes and glared at the smirking man opposite her. Who does he think he is? How could he treat her so lightly? I'm sorry, Yang, I really can't control myself. Qinzu put away his smile and lowered his head in shame. How could you do this? Are all men like you when they have money? As she spoke, Yang's eyes slowly turned red. She felt that she had become a little humble in front of Qinzu. Even when he treated her lightly, she didn't dare to say anything. The 6 million was like a huge rock, pressing on her heart, making her confidence dissipate bit by bit. Qinzu's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. He was not afraid of anything now, but he was most afraid of girls crying. Qinzhu quickly put on a sincere expression and said, "Yang Ye, you know what? I have liked you for a long time ago." Yang Ye, whose eyes were already full of tears, suddenly became very excited after hearing this. She was a little surprised and a little bit unbelievable. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 866 Good news. The warm sunshine spreads over the streets and alleys of Jiangnan City, bringing a touch of warmth to this winter afternoon. Walking in the bustling pedestrian street, Qinzhu and Yang Ye are silent to each other. One wants to say something but doesn't know what to say. The other simply doesn't want to talk, enjoying the caress of the sun, just wanting to keep walking. Let's go inside. Seeing Yang Ye passing by them all again without entering, Qinzhu couldn't stand it anymore and took the initiative to suggest. Although there is warm sunshine in the sky, it's windy today. Although she is fine, the silly girl next to her has red ears from the cold. Hearing Qinzhu's words, Yang Ye looked up, nodded gently, and walked inside. She knew that this mall was a very famous luxury shopping center in Jiangnan City, which concentrated big-name luxury goods from all over the world. It can be said that as long as there are luxury goods sold in China, you can find them here. When she worked in Jiangnan before, she and her colleagues came here several times, but they just looked at it and didn't even have the courage to try it on. But today, for some reason, when Qinzhu suggested to come in and take a look, she did not hesitate or feel timid at all. Glancing at Qinzhu, who followed her closely, Yang Ye felt a little bitter. Perhaps, this is the benefit of having a rich man around you. Yang Ye finally believed Qinzhu's explanation. She actually knew that Qinzhu did like her in high school. It is said that little girls mature early. Although Qinzhu's performance was not very obvious at the time, it was still captured by the little girl who was impressed. However, Qinzhu now is no longer the Qinzhu of the past. She also heard that Qinzhu now has a girlfriend, which is why she is in a complicated mood now. Could it be that her mother really guessed it right, and she could not escape the fate of being kept after all? But she was really unwilling to be a canary without freedom. "Xiaoyi, look at this one, does it suit you very well?" Qinzhu's voice awakened Yang Ye, who was in deep thought. Looking up, she found that they were standing in a brand store at the moment. "And where is Qinzhu?" He was pointing at a beige woolen coat, looking at her with a smile on his face. "No need. I have my own clothes." Shaking her head, Yang Ye subconsciously rejected Qinzhu's kindness. "It's okay, go try it on." Qinzhu turned a deaf ear to Yang Ye's refusal and directly signaled the female salesperson to bring the clothes over. Although they didn't know Qinzhu, the salespeople knew the clothes he was wearing and the paper leaf on his wrist. So, the enthusiastic female salesperson quickly brought the clothes over, looked at Yang Ye with some envy, and said respectfully, "Miss, please come here." Yang Ye had no choice. She herself was a person who didn't know how to refuse people. After rolling her eyes at this guy, she followed the salesperson to the fitting room. When the sun set, Qinzhu took the somewhat tired Yang Ye back to the hospital. Don't get me wrong, he didn't do anything. He was honest all afternoon, and he was a standard gentleman. Yang Ye was also quite satisfied with this, and his attitude became much more lively than at the beginning. However, when she arrived at the door of the ward, her pretty face, which was so fragile that it could be broken with a flick of a finger, still had a slight blush on it. "Well, don't talk nonsense when you go in." Turning her head, Yang Ye warned this guy with some worry, so that he wouldn't talk nonsense again. Qinzhu raised one hand above his head and made a solemn look. "Don't worry, I promise I won't talk nonsense." "Humph, you know what's good for you." Nodding with satisfaction, Yang Ye was about to turn around and open the door, but she felt her lips getting hot, and something soft and wet pressed against her. Although it was just a touch, Yang Ye was still a little confused, and she stood there, not knowing how to react. "My first kiss is gone." My first kiss, just gone like that. Just when the little universe was about to explode, Qinzhu grabbed her little hand, pushed the door and walked into the ward. Yang Ye held back the reprimand that was about to come out of her mouth. Her little face flushed red like a ripe apple. "Auntie, are you feeling better?" Putting the dinner he bought on the road on the table next to him, Qinzhu sat down in front of the bed and criticized himself with some shame. "It's all because of Xiaoyi. She didn't tell me that Auntie was sick. Last time she asked me for money, I thought she was going to buy something. If I had known that Auntie was sick, I would have come here earlier. No, nothing. Yang's mother was confused by Qinzyu's sudden enthusiasm and was actually at a loss for a moment. What are you doing? She glared at Qinzyu coquettishly, and Yang touched her hot little face. After calming down her somewhat excited mood, she said, "Mom, this is the dinner I bought for you. Eat some first." Nodding, Yang's mother came back to her senses and took the lunchbox with a complicated mood, and asked, "Have you all eaten?" "I have eaten." Qinzyu nodded quickly, and seeing that the atmosphere was a big dull, he smiled and said, "Auntie, how do you feel now?" "I have already talked to doctors today. Once there is a suitable kidney source, it will definitely be used first." As if to confirm Qinzyu's words, his voice had just fallen, and before Yang's mother and Yang could react, the door of the ward was knocked. Mr. Qin is here too?" In Qinzyu's surprised eyes, Dr. Zhen, who had just been mentioned, walked in with a smile on his face. Yes." Although a little surprised, Qinzyu still stood up quickly and shook his hand with him, smiling and asked, "Dr. Zhen, you haven't finished get off work yet so late, you're really hard working." Not hard. Waving his hand, Dr. Zhen excitedly opened the folder in his hand and said excitedly, "Mr. Qin, good news, I have lived up to your trust. After my many contracts, the kidney source has been settled." "Oh?" Qinzyu was in high spirits and asked impatiently, "What do you mean? Did someone donate?" "Yes." Dr. Zhen nodded, looked at Yang's mother on the bed, and congratulated. This is also Ms. Yang's fate. Today, there happened to be a volunteer who is a perfect match for her. Didn't I rush over immediately? Really? That's great. Yang Ye, who was next to him, had forgotten that she was taken advantage of again. She hugged Qinzyu's arm excitedly and kissed him directly on his old face. "Qinzyu, thank you so much, I will definitely repay you well." Chapter 867 Surgery. Although he didn't know how this girl would repay him, Qinzyu was still very happy after hearing it. "Dr. Zhen, thank you for your trouble." Qinzyu thanked Dr. Zhen with a smile on his face and asked, "In this case, can we prepare for the operation now?" "There is no rush." Dr. Zhen shook his head and said with a smile, "The patient needs to rest for a few days before the operation, but, you still need to talk to the other person." Looking at the gesture in the other person's hand, which is universally used worldwide, Qinzyu immediately understood. This so-called volunteer must not be that simple. However, as long as he can cure Yang's mother, he will not care about these things. Anyway, one is willing to fight and the other is willing to be beaten. There is a saying that it is difficult to persuade a damn ghost with good words, and there is no need for him to get involved. After making an appointment with Qinzyu, Dr. Zhen left with satisfaction. He can be said to have returned with a full load today. Even if it doesn't succeed this time, it doesn't matter, anyway, the 100,000 yuan reward has been received. When the doors closed again, a somewhat suppressed sobbing sound rang out in the ward. Mother Yang leaned against the bed, holding the lunchbox in both hands, and cried with joy. As the saying goes, even ants are greedy for life, let alone humans. Originally, she thought there was no hope, but now she suddenly knew that she could continue to live. How could Mother Yang not be happy? Not excited? "Mom, don't be too excited, but take care of yourself." Seeing that her mother was a little excited, Yang hurried forward, helped the old woman to breathe, and smiled and comforted her. "You'll have surgery in a few days. If you are not feeling well now, it will be troublesome." Yeah, I'm fine." After hearing Yang Ye's caring words, Mother Yang forced a smile. Qinzyu stayed in Mother Yang's ward until after 7 o'clock in the evening, and then he said goodbye and left. When he sent her to the door, Yang Ye was about to turn back, but was pulled back by Qinzyu. "What for?" Pausing, Yang Ye looked over with some curiosity. However, before she finished speaking, she felt that the figure in front of her was getting closer and closer. Especially when that somewhat heavy breath came in front of her, Yang Ye felt that she could not help but get goosebumps on her body. Qinzyu, who got what he wanted, came to the door of the ward not far away next door in satisfaction. After restraining his emotions and carefully opening the door, Qinzyu found that Qin's mother was still inside with him. "Mom, why haven't you gone home yet?" Sitting down next to her, Qinzyu looked at his mother's red and swollen eyes, and said with some heartache, "You can't let your body fall." "Yes, sister, you go back and rest with your eldest nephew first, we brothers will be here to guard it." The Zikayang brothers on the side also began to persuade her. After a day, they were also afraid that their eldest cousin's body could not bear it. Mother Qin didn't insist. She was really tired after crying all day. After carefully instructing the two brothers, she stood up and said goodbye, and rushed to the hotel with Qinzu to rest. After all, money can get things done. Under the temptation of Qinzu's cash check, it only took 2 days for doctors to help Yang's mother arrange the operation. Arriving at the hospital early in the morning, Yang looked very anxious after watching her mother being pushed into the operating room. "Qinzu, do you think my mother will be okay?" Sitting on the rest chair in front of the door, Yang gently nestled in Qinzu's arms, staring at the operating room quietly and refusing to move away. "Don't worry." Qinzu held the beauty's slender waist with one hand, and held her trembling little hands with the other hand. "Didn't doctors say that they have an 80% success rate for this kind of operation?" "Really? That's good, that's good." Yang seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, closed her eyes, and murmured a prayer in her mouth. Qinzu felt distressed when he saw this, and tightened his arms, but he didn't know how to comfort her, so he could only quietly accompany her and wait for the result. After a long time, as the lights in the operating room suddenly went out, Qinzu and the others stood up subconsciously and rushed to the door like flying. "Doctor, how is my mother?" "Dr. Zhen, was the operation successful?" Dr. Zhen, who had just walked out of the ward, was blocked by the two before he had time to catch his breath. However, for the sake of the check that he had not yet received, he still forced a smile and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Qin and Mrs. Qin, the operation was successful." "Woo, thank you, doctor." Hearing the doctor's words, Yang could no longer suppress the excitement in her heart, and burst into tears. Qinzu patted the beauty on the back gently and felt relieved. He nodded at Dr. Zeng and said with a smile, "Thank you for your hard work, Dr. Zeng. I wonder when Aunt Yang can be discharged from the hospital." "Not yet." Shaking his head, Dr. Zeng signaled the nurse beside him to send Yang's mother back to the ward. He explained as they walked, "Although the operation was very successful, we still need to observe the post-operative reaction. If there is no rejection, then you will be truly out of the danger period." "Will there be rejection?" Yang, whose emotions had calmed down a little under Qinzu's comfort, became nervous again. "It depends on the person, or in other words, it depends on luck." After turning into an office, Dr. Zeng motioned the two to sit down opposite him, and then he sat on the chair inside. After pondering for a moment, he explained, "Kidney transplant surgery is a little different from other surgeries. After all, it is to transplant a strange organ into your own body. Although the blood type and everything are the same, there will definitely be some differences." Then how big is the difference? "Will my mother be in danger?" Staring at the doctor opposite her nervously, Yang's heart was in her throat. She never thought that after the surgery was finally completed, there would be such a danger now. No one can guarantee this. "I just said that it all depends on luck." Dr. Zeng shook his head and said with some embarrassment, "If there is no rejection, you can be discharged from the hospital after a period of recuperation. But if there is rejection, you will need to continue treatment." "Woo-hoo," as Dr. Zeng's voice fell, Yang, who had just stopped sobbing, cried again, making Qinzu a little flustered. Qinzu had no choice but to wink at the guy who always criticized him and asked, "Dr. Zeng, according to your estimate, what is the probability of Aunt Yang having a rejection reaction?" Chapter 868 Heavy Mood. After receiving Qinzu's eyes, Dr. Zeng realized that he seemed to have been too pessimistic. If the god of wealth in front of him was unhappy, he would lose all the benefits. Thinking of this, Dr. Zeng patted his chest and said with a smile, "Mrs. Qin, don't worry too much. What I just said was the worst result. According to my experience, the effect of your mother's operation is still very good." Yang, who was lying on Qinzu's shoulder and sobbing, was almost choked to death by this sentence. She raised her head, wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, and stared at the doctor opposite, wondering whether she should open his mouth. "Good guy, you have been scaring me just now. What are you yelling about? You almost scared me to have a heart attack, you know." Seeing that things were a little out of control and seeing that another medical dispute incident was about to happen, Qinzu hurriedly stood up. "Well, Dr. Zeng, let's go see the patient first. Sorry for disturbing you." "No problem." No. Although he said no, Dr. Zeng quickly stood up to see him off. There was nothing he could do. Getting beaten up was a minor matter. If he couldn't get the check, he would lose a lot. "Well, Mr. Qin, Mrs. Qin, don't worry. I'll go to the ward when I have time." Hearing what Dr. Zhang said, Yanya snorted coldly and walked out of the doctor's office with Qin Zhu. Coming to the corridor, Yanya naturally put her arms around Qin Zhu's arm, twitched her nose, and muttered with some dissatisfaction. This guy, I thought he was a good doctor, but it turns out he can only scare people. Qin Zhu, who was enjoying the feeling of a warm and soft girl leaning against his body, smiled when he heard it. Aren't all doctors like this? If you are not sick, they say you have a minor illness. If you have a minor illness, they say you have a serious illness. If you have a serious illness, they say you have a terminal illness. If you really have a terminal illness, he will directly tell you that you don't need treatment. How great. What's so great about that? Yanya pouted, a little dissatisfied, and pinched Qin Zhu's arm hard. He's already scared me like that, and you don't say anything to him. Okay, I'll teach him a lesson later, is that okay? Although he didn't feel any pain at all, Qin Zhu still pretended to be in pain and opened his mouth, begging for mercy. Auntie, let's let go first, okay? If you have anything to say, let's go home and talk it over tonight. Who told you to go home and talk it over? After letting go of her little hand, Yanya glared at him charmingly, turned her head away, and ignored him. When they came to the door of the ward, Yanya subconsciously wanted to take her hand back, but was pulled by Qin Zhu. Auntie, how do you feel now? Qin Zhu pushed open the door and Yanya walked in with a slightly red face. Not bad. Perhaps because she had just undergone surgery, Yan's mother's voice was a little weak. Qin Zhu saw this and reacted, and quickly smiled and said, in that case, you should have a good rest, and we will wait outside. As he said that, Qin Zhu tucked the corners of the quilt for Yang's mother, and pulled Yanya, who looked dazed, out. What are you doing? I still have to accompany my mother. When they arrived at the lounge outside, Yanya broke free from Qin Zhu's big hand and stared at him with big eyes. However, there was some shyness in her clear eyes. Of course, she couldn't forget how badly she was bullied in this place just 2 days ago. Hehe, it seems that you understand it too. Because Yang's mother was in the room, Qin Zhu deliberately lowered his voice, and approached Yanya step by step with a sly smile. You, don't come over here, or I'll yell. Go ahead, yell until your throat is broken and see if anyone comes back to save you. You bastard. Qin Zhu's words made Yanya's face turn red. She stamped her feet in frustration and sat down on the sofa, as if she had given up resistance. Qin Zhu was happy, rubbed his hands, and rushed towards the little lamb on the sofa. Ding-ling-lin, a burst of rapid phone rings scared Qin Zhu, who was rushing towards the sofa, so much that he almost fell flat on his face. Who is it? At this time, he stopped and answered the phone angrily. Before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by the voice on the other end. Where are you, you little bastard? Come back quickly, your great-aunt is dying. After saying this, Qin's mother hung up the phone without giving Qin Zhu a chance to react. What's wrong? Yanya on the sofa also heard a little sound, stood up and looked at him with some concern. It's okay, it's just that my great-aunt is not in good health. Shaking his head, Qin Zhu sighed, and no longer had the heart to pick flowers and hunt for beauties. He stretched out his hand to embrace Yanya's delicate body and patted her gently. You stay here and accompany your aunt. I'll go over there to take a look. I may not have time to come over these days. It's okay, you go. Putting her arm around Qin Zhu's waist, Yanya comforted him with a depressed look. Qin Zhu, don't be too sad. People will eventually grow old, get sick and die. No one can stop these things. Yeah, I know. Nodding, Qin Zhu thought to himself that I'm not that sad, I just feel that life is short. After saying goodbye to Yanya, Qin Zhu pushed the door and walked out. When he arrived at the door of the operating room, he saw that the light above was off. The door of the operating room opened, and Dr. Zhang walked out with a tired face. Facing Qin Zhu and his group, he shook his head helplessly. It's a pity, we have tried our best. You can go in and see him for the last time. As his voice fell, the door of the operating room suddenly became a mess, and several people ran inside in a hurry. While running, Qin Zhu could still hear the crying that could not be suppressed. He knew that it was the Zikaiang brothers. Although they were already in their 30s, they were crying so heartbreakingly now. Alas, I'm sorry, Mr. Clean, we really tried our best. Taking off the mask, Dr. Zhang wiped a few tears from the corners of his eyes and sighed helplessly. Although as a well-known doctor, he has been accustomed to life and death. But this does not mean that he can still talk and laugh when facing such a situation. Every time at this time, his mood is still a little heavy, and he will even be depressed all day. This has nothing to do with character and medical ethics. It is just an emotion that naturally arises when an intelligent life faces the departure of another intelligent life. It's nothing, I know, it's not your fault. Kinzu did not follow in. He leaned against the door and lit a cigarette, took a deep puff, and said with big circles under his eyes, somewhat self-deprecatingly, "Aren't people alive just to die? It's just a matter of a day earlier or later." Chapter 869. Good things come with time. Time flies, and a few days pass in the blink of an eye. Although living is to wait for death, life must go on before death comes. The funeral of my great-aunt was very grand, and it was specially held in the countryside from Jiangnan. After the funeral, Qin's father and mother returned to their hometown with their sister and brother-in-law. As for Kinzu, he returned to Jiangnan again and went straight to the hospital. Because he had been busy with the funeral these days, he hadn't contacted Yanya for a few days. After arriving at the hospital, Kinzu didn't call her, but went straight to the ward. In the ward, Yanya was feeding her mother with a bowl of porridge. After hearing the sound of the door opening, she turned around and saw that it was Kinzu who came back. A look of surprise flashed across her face. After Yanya helped her mother wipe the corners of her mouth, she stood up and asked, "Have you dealt with everything?" "Yes, it's done." "My condolences." "It's okay." Waving his hand, Kinzu looked at Yang's mother who was staring at him on the bed, forced a smile on his face, and asked, "Auntie, how do you feel? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" "No, Xiaoqin, thank you so much." After chatting with doctors and nurses in the past few days, Yang's mother also realized that the big boy in front of her had spent so much time and effort on her illness. Many people who came before her were still waiting for a kidney transplant, but she, who came later, got ahead of them. Sitting at the head of the bed, Kinzu looked at Yanya thoughtfully, and said with a smile, "Auntie, you are too polite. Your business is my business." "What are you talking about?" Before Yang's mother could say anything, Yanya directly pulled Kinzu up, glared at him unhappily, and said, "You were not honest just after coming back. You are so dirty. Don't sit anywhere." Kinzu's face was embarrassed. He rushed over just after getting off the car, and his body was indeed a little dirty. "Stupid girl, how can you talk like that?" Before Kinzu could say anything, Yang's mother scolded him with some dissatisfaction. Yanya wilted immediately, rolled her eyes at Kinzu, and said nothing more. "It's okay, Auntie, I'll go wash first and come back. I smell a little bit when I just got off the car." Seeing that Yanya looked at him with a bit of unkindness, Kinzu quickly said something and wanted to run away. But Yanya seemed to have expected it. As soon as Kinzu walked out, she followed him from behind. "HMPH, bad guy, even my mother is speaking for you." When they got to the outer room, Yanya sat down on the sofa and glared at Kinzu angrily. "That's called standing up for the weak, don't you understand that?" Seeing this, Kinzu came to the beauty with a smile and sat down next to her. Of course, those in-lash claws were not idle at all, and they climbed to the peak as soon as they touched. "What are you doing?" "Stop it, Mom is still here." Although she refused, Yanya's body did not resist much. Kinzu was happy in his heart. It seemed that the time to win this girl was not far away. However, when he was about to take action again, the damn mobile phone in his pocket rang again at the critical moment. Ding-ling, who is it? Without even looking at it, Kinzu answered the phone with a slightly unfriendly tone. Come to think of it, anyone would get a little angry if they were always disturbed at the critical moment. Chen Mu's mouth twitched on the other end of the phone, leaning against the head of the bed, and said helplessly, "Boss, it's me, what's wrong with you?" Brother Chen. After laughing, Kinzu sat down on the sofa helplessly, looked at the time, and asked, "What's wrong? It should be almost 11 o'clock over there. Aren't you sleeping yet?" "It's still early, only 11 o'clock. Smiling casually, Chen Mu asked jokingly, "I want to report something to you, but I don't know if it's convenient for you now." Kinzu wanted to say it was inconvenient, but looking at the beauty who had already left beside him, he could only sigh helplessly. "Go ahead, it's convenient now." It seems that I'm calling at the wrong time." Hearing Kinzu's helpless tone, Chen Mu couldn't help but laugh. After a smile and a joke, he turned to the main topic. "Boss, when will you come back to see the stores I told you about last time?" Talking about business, Kinzu also put away his somewhat lazy mentality and asked, "Are you talking about the one near Boston's Chinatown?" No, not just the one in Chinatown. Although Chen Mu understood what Qinzu meant, he still corrected him. There are 5 more stores in Winthrop, Chelsea, Avery, Somerville, and Cambridge, a total of 6 stores. But with so many stores added at once, can we take care of them here? Qinzu rubbed his temples with a headache. Let's not talk about the cost of buying the stores, just so many waiters, chefs and helpers, can you find them? Recruiting workers is not a problem. I'm also contacting the chefs, so it's not a big problem. Chen Mu sighed and said helplessly, the most important thing now is that the owners of these stores don't want to rent them out now. They plan to sell the stores directly. Qinzu was a little stunned when he heard this. Didn't you say that they were willing to rent the stores last time you called? As if he understood Qinzu's doubts, Chen Mu explained with a wry smile. Boss, you haven't been in the United States these days, so you don't know that the housing prices have fallen further, and the decline is huge. Some small merchants can't sit still and want to sell their shops for cash. Falling again? Qinzu understood a little now. It turned out that the housing prices fell again. Thinking that his net worth had shrunk again, Qinzu felt depressed. Fortunately, he didn't have many properties under his name. The most important ones were ranches and fisheries, which could not be counted as simple properties. Suddenly, Qinzu thought of something very important and asked with some doubts. Brother Chen, since the housing prices are still falling, is there any need for us to buy now? Of course. Chen Mu answered Qinzu's doubts decisively. Why? Qinzu was still a little worried, and asked in confusion. Are you sure they won't continue to fall? Yes, boss, I'm sure that housing prices have fallen beyond expectations and will definitely not fall further. Chen Mu smiled and acted confidently. Even if it wants to fall, someone will prevent it from falling. You mean the government will take action? Qinzu seemed to have understood, but was still a little confused. Brother Chen, since we can think of this, can't others think of it? Why are they still selling? Chapter 870 Preparing to return. Although they know it, they can't wait. Shrugging his shoulders, Chen Mu laughed with a gloating look. Boss, the money they used to buy the house was not their own. Now the bank is asking for a payment, and they are so anxious that they're about to jump off the building. So, this is a good opportunity to buy up the bottom? Qinzu's eyes lit up. You can say that. Chen Mu nodded at first, but then changed his tone and advised. Boss, there is no need to buy up the bottom. Let's just buy some for our own store. After all, this is not in China. It's better not to touch the real estate industry if we can. Qinzu agreed with what he said. The real estate industry, no matter where it is, cannot be separated from officials and people. Even if the United States is capitalist, it would be a joke if you want to play with real estate without the support of government policies. Besides, how many people are there in the whole United States? The competition in real estate is already very fierce, and I can't just get involved. However, although he agreed, Qinzu still didn't know whether to laugh or cry about Chen Mu's words. Because from what he said, it seems that he thinks he can do well in China. Shaking his head, Qinzu complained in his heart, in their eyes, is it that having money to go abroad means having a strong background in China? After chatting for a while, when it was time to hang up the phone, Chen Mu couldn't help but remind him again. Boss, you'd better come back soon, our time is very tight. Okay, I know. Qinzu hung up the phone helplessly, and he was so tangled in his heart. The duck that was about to be caught, could he let it fly away? What if it flew away? There was nothing he could do if it flew away. Sighing, Qinzu decided to go back. After all, men should focus on their careers. Of course, these words were all Qinzu's own comfort to himself. In fact, the most important thing was that Qinzu felt that the person's closest person was still in the hospital, and he was thinking about doing that to him, which was really a bit beastly. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Yang Yi, who had settled her mother, came over from behind. Seeing Qinzu's tangled expression, she said very considerately, if you have something to do, go and do it first. I can stay here by myself. How can that be possible? Qinzu shook his head. It's really tiring to take care of Aunt by yourself. Where's Uncle? Why haven't I seen him these days? It would have been better if she didn't say it. As soon as she talked about it, Yang Yi's expression became a little complicated. He left when I was very young and ran away with a woman. Qinzu was a little embarrassed and hurriedly explained. Well, Xiaoyi, I'm sorry, it's okay, it's been a long time since the incident. Yang Yi smiled, waved her hand to stop Qinzu from speaking, and said jokingly, You were a very incompetent pursuer. In 3 years of high school, you didn't even find out about his family situation. This, Kinzu's expression suddenly became more embarrassed. Back then, he was still an innocent boy who would blush when talking to a girl. How could he take the initiative to inquire about a girl's family situation? Ha, okay, I won't tease you anymore. Seeing that Kinzu was getting angry, Yanya quickly restrained her smile and pretended to be very serious and asked, "You haven't told me yet, what happened just now? You looked so sad." Just now, while dragging a long tail tone, Kinzu slowly approached Yanya. When she realized that something was wrong and wanted to run away, she found that it was a little too late. "Hey, come on, I'll tell you what I was thinking just now." "Humph, a pervert is a pervert, don't admit it." Rolling his eyes at this guy, Yanya leaned a little on his shoulder and muttered, "From the time you transferred 6 million to me, I knew that you must have bad intentions." 6 million? Kinzu was a little confused. When did he transfer 6 million to her? However, she didn't look like she was talking nonsense. Did he sleepwalk when? No. Kinzu suddenly remembered that when he asked Jennifer to transfer money, he didn't seem to specify that it was RMB. So, she actually transferred $1 million to Yanya. There were many thoughts in his mind, but Kinzu didn't show it on his face. He still looked shameless and stayed close to the beauty's neck and refused to get up. "Hee, it's itchy, get up quickly." Yanya couldn't help but giggled when the hot air from Kinzu's nose sprayed on her neck. She turned her head to avoid someone's harassment and begged for mercy in a low voice. After playing for a while, Kinzu let go of Yanya, who was a little out of breath, and the two hugged each other and sat on the sofa to rest. "You can't take care of your aunt alone. How about this, find a nurse to help you watch together." Holding the beauty's slender waist, Kinzu enjoyed it while continuing the unfinished topic just now. "No need, right?" Yanya twisted her body, changed to a comfortable position and lay down, and said lazily, "I can do it by myself, there is no need to spend the money." "What can I do?" Kinzu stretched out his hand and pinched her thin face, and said unhappily, "Look at you, you were so pretty when you were on the train, but now your face is almost gone. It's gone, and I won't show it to you." Yanya was a little embarrassed and annoyed by Kinzu pinching her face and saying that she was not pretty. She raised her chin and glared at him hatefully, as if she wanted to take a bite to relieve her hatred. "Don't make trouble, be good." Kinzu lowered his head and pecked the pouting little mouth again, and said with a smile, "Find a nurse to take care of Auntie, and you should also have a good rest for a few days, otherwise Auntie will be well, but you will be not. You are not well, you crow mouth." Rolling a look at Kinzu, Yanya did not refute this time. It would be good to have a nurse to help. She was indeed a little tired these days. However, thinking of how thoughtful Kinzu was today, Yanya seemed to understand something and asked softly, "Kinzu, are you leaving?" Hearing this, Kinzu fell silent, and the whole room became quiet for a while. After a long time, he nodded softly and said helplessly, "Yes, there is something going on in the United States, and I have to rush over to deal with it." Chapter 871 Return to America. Rumble. With the huge roar of the aircraft engine, a silver white passenger plane slowly took off and gradually disappeared from the sight of everyone at the airport. Retracting her gaze, Yanya lowered her head and slowly left the airport. She wanted to hold back her tears, but the tears still flowed slowly along the corners of her eyes. Before Kinzu left, although Yanya was a little reluctant, she did not feel the sadness of parting in his position in her heart. Even she herself did not realize that, unconsciously, she had such a great sense of dependence on Kinzu. Until a plane disappeared in front of her eyes, she felt that her heart had become empty. It was like suddenly losing the backbone, and she felt a little confused and helpless. When my mother was sick, I felt confused, and he lent me money. When my mother had surgery, I was very anxious, and he was with me. When my mother gradually recovered, I was very tired, and he took the initiative to help me find a nurse. Little by little, one by one, although the things were not big, they left an indelible mark in Yanya's heart. Here's a hurdle that she can never cross in her life. At 10 a.m. New York time, when Kinzu walked out of Kennedy International Airport with a shoulder bag and a few female bodyguards, he was discovered by Chain Mew and Jefferson, who were waiting at the airport. "Hi, Clean, this way. Guys, long time no see." Seeing this, Kinzu walked up quickly, shook hands with the two of them, and after saying hello, he turned his head to look at Jefferson on the side, feeling very puzzled. How did these two guys get together? Did Chain Mew get into a lawsuit? "Boss, let's go to the hotel first." Looking at Kinzu's somewhat suspicious look, Jefferson did not rush to explain, but motioned him to go outside. Nodding, he followed the two out of the airport and saw his familiar Cavalier the 15th. "Hey, it's fixed." Kinzu was very surprised when he saw his sturdy car. "Is Philip's car shop so efficient?" "Of course, boss. After all, it cost a lot of money," Jefferson explained with a smile while helping Kinzu open the car door. In fact, what he didn't know was that if Ryan and Simon hadn't gone there every day to work, Philip wouldn't know and it would be fixed. It seems that these two guys are quite efficient and worth training. Kinzu smacked his lips and wondered if he should get these two guys around. After all, if there were no two men around to do the hard work, it would always seem that he was a little unsympathetic to women. If the two guys who were enjoying the sunbath in the ranch knew that they were remembered by their boss just because they tried their best at work, I wonder if they would cry. Soon, Night the 15th stopped at the door of a 5-star hotel. When Kinzu and his friends got out of the car and walked into the lobby, the hotel waiter had already greeted them. "Business suite on the top floor, thank you." Walking in front, he took out a dollar bill and lowered it, saying thank you softly. After the group of people walked into the business suite, Chenmu looked at Kinzu, who was a little tired, and asked hesitantly, "Boss, do you want to take a rest first?" "No, let's talk about what's going on first." Waving his hand, Kinzu rolled his eyes helplessly. "You are not deliberately trying to piss me off. With your hesitant look, do you think I can sleep?" "Hee, well, it's mainly about those stores." Chenmu laughed twice, pushed Jefferson beside him, and motioned him to talk. Adjusting his glasses, Jefferson was pushed out by Chenmu helplessly. Facing Kinzu's puzzled eyes, he could only explain, "Boss, it's like this. We visited several university towns around us these 2 days and found that the housing prices there also fluctuated, so..." "Wait," Kinzu waved his hand to interrupt this guy's report, staring at the facial expressions of the two with some suspicion. "Why are you going to visit this? We haven't taken down the 6 companies now." This, Jefferson rubbed his hands awkwardly. Under Kinzu's gaze, he was sweating anxiously. Fortunately, Chenmu was quite good to his friends. Seeing that Jefferson was a little exhausted, he stepped forward at this critical moment and explained to Kinzu with a wry smile, "Well, boss, I think this is a good opportunity." "What good opportunity?" Lying lazily on a sofa, Kinzu spread his hands helplessly. "As far as I know, although the housing prices are falling, they haven't fallen drastically yet, right?" This, after being asked by Kinzu, Chenmu was a little speechless, but he still didn't give up and continued to persuade. "Boss, although the housing prices haven't fallen drastically yet, we won't suffer any loss if we buy it." "That's true." Kinzu nodded in agreement after hearing this. But then he thought that this guy wanted to open more than a dozen stores at once, and Kinzu had a headache again. "Well, Brother Chen, you have to eat one bite at a time and walk one step at a time. I think we should be more cautious." Crossing his hands on his chest, Kinzu pondered for a while, and in the expectant eyes of Chenmu and Jefferson, he said, "Let's open 6 stores first. If the response is good, we can continue to open more. But by then, the housing prices will go up again." Chenmu said unwillingly, "But what if it falls?" Kinzu shrugged helplessly. "After all, the market is always unpredictable, and no one knows what will happen at any time, right?" Chenmu was silent. He had to admit that Kinzu's decision was still correct at this stage. But seeing that the opportunity to become famous was about to be gone, Chenmu also felt a little bored. The reason why he followed Kinzu to start a business was that he wanted to be a boss directly and not be restricted by others. But unexpectedly, now he still couldn't make the decision. However, Chenmu did not complain about Kinzu's idea. If it were him, he would also have to check it carefully when it involved a transaction involving tens of millions of dollars. Chenmu's somewhat lost expression happened to be seen by Kinzu opposite. It doesn't matter if you don't look at it, but Kinzu's heart jumped when he saw it. This can't go on like this. Is it going to be bad? If Chenmu doesn't help him run the restaurant, who can he find? Thinking of this, Kinzu's expression also slowed down a lot. After a moment of hesitation, he looked at Chenmu opposite and said with a smile, "Brother Chen, do you think this will work?" Chapter 872 Meeting an acquaintance in the hotel. Looking up in confusion, Chenmu looked at Kinzu, wanting to hear what he had to say. "Look." Kinzu gestured with his hands and said with a smile, "Haven't we already decided on 6 stores? Let's open 6 first, but don't let go of the rest." "Boss, what do you mean?" Chen Mu seemed to understand a little, nodded, and looked over with an expectant look. Bingo. Qin Zhu snapped his fingers and said with a smile. Brother Chen, you're right. What I mean is that we can take down the houses first while the housing prices are low, but don't put them in this batch of store opening plans. That's not bad. After listening to Qin Zhu's plan, Chen Mu's eyes lit up. Although it didn't reach the point where he was satisfied, it was still a good compromise. Nodding, Chen Mu said with a smile. Not only can we save the money for opening a store temporarily, but we won't miss this opportunity. Boss, your business acumen is really becoming more and more forward-looking. What are you talking about? Qin Zhu waved his hand after glaring at this guy unhappily. Go out, all of you, I'm so sleepy, I want to have a good sleep. Chen Mu and Jefferson looked at each other, and didn't stay any longer, and smiled and got up to say goodbye. After the two left, Qin Zhu entered the bathroom to take a hot bath to eliminate the fatigue of the journey, then picked up the phone and started making calls. It didn't matter if he made a call, he wanted to sleep, but after making a few calls, Qin Zhu found that it was already past 11 o'clock in the afternoon. Shaking his head, he walked over to pick up the phone and called the front desk, ordered a steak and some snacks, and asked for a drink, and then put the phone back. Alas, these days are so comfortable. Lying on the soft big bed, waiting for lunch to be served, Qin Zhu lamented his life with some boredom. Not long after, the doorbell rang. Qin Zhu walked over and opened the door, but unexpectedly found that the guy who delivered the food seemed familiar to him. Hey, man, have we met before? Looking at the short Chinese youth in front of him, Qin Zhu felt more and more familiar, and couldn't help asking directly. After hearing Qin Zhu's words, the Chinese youth in front of him raised his head and looked at Qin Zhu carefully. Are you Qin Zhu? It doesn't matter if you don't look at him. After looking at him, the Chinese youth's face changed from confusion to surprise, and then quickly turned to shock. Yes, I am. Who are you? Nodding, Qin Zhu admitted it very readily, and asked the waiter to sit on the sofa opposite. To be honest, he was a little embarrassed now. There was no way. When two people met, the other person recognized him at a glance, but he didn't recognize him until now. This was already a very rude behavior. Maybe it was God's eyes, or maybe this Chinese young man was very good at observing words and expressions. Anyway, just when Qin Zhu was a little embarrassed, the young Chinese man took the initiative to speak. Mr. Qin, I'm Zhenbin Yan. I didn't expect you to remember me after just meeting me once. Zhenbin Yan? In an instant, Qin Zhu remembered who the guy in front of him was. Wasn't this the guy he met when he accompanied Mobuka to the bar for a drinking party? I remember that I had just arrived in the United States for a few days and was still using Mamo, an app that was specifically designed to hook up with people. Why are you here? Have you graduated? The thoughts in his mind flashed through his mind. What Qin Zhu was concerned about now was why this guy was working as an ordinary waiter here. Not yet, isn't this a part-time job, to earn some living expenses or something? When Zhenbin Yan talked about this, his face flushed slightly. We are all human beings. Look at how they live. Look at yourself, what kind of life are you living? Is that so? Qin Zhu nodded, and seeing his embarrassed look, he didn't ask anything, but smiled and chatted with him about other things. For example, the situation of Chinese students studying here, and for example, the losses caused to the United States by the last storm. Anyway, after a while of talking, the two of them had a very good chat. When Qin Zhu felt a little hungry and wanted to eat something, he found that the food he ordered was already cold. How about this? I'll just take it down and heat it up. Seeing this, Zhenbin Yan stood up with a smile and walked out with the dining cart. Qin Zhu wanted to say no, let's go downstairs to eat. But after thinking about it, he still didn't move, and let Zhenbin Yan push the food on the dining cart back again. Qin Zhu didn't have to wait for long. About a quarter of an hour later, the dining cart was pushed up again. At the same time, a deputy manager-level person also came up. Hi, Mr. Qin, I've heard of you for a long time. The slightly plump manager, with golden curly hair and licking his belly, said with a wry smile. Due to the mistake of our employees, the food has deteriorated. We are deeply sorry for this and have prepared a table of fresh food for you. Please enjoy it. Huh. Qin Zhu was a little puzzled. Why was it because of the employee's mistake? Wasn't he just chatting with him? Ahem, I think you may have misunderstood something, sir. After two dry coughs, Qin Zhu smiled and explained. This gentleman and I are friends who have known each other before. We chatted casually for a while. The deterioration of the food is also related to me. Is that so? The fact manager glanced at Zhengbin beside him, feeling a little entangled. Is what this kid said true? But if it's true, why didn't you say it earlier? That's okay. Since you were friends, we won't disturb you from chatting. As he said that, the fact manager turned around and signaled his men to push the breakfast cart over. After receiving the dining cart, the fact manager still had that long-lasting smile on his face, and said politely, Mr. Clean, in this case, the food on this dining cart will be our hotel's compensation for the inconvenience caused to your travel. Qin was a little speechless when he heard this. He didn't expect that the service awareness of this hotel was really good. After nodding and indicating that he accepted the compensation, the fact manager led people out of the suite. This guy finally left. The moment the fact manager left the room, Zhengbin breathed a sigh of relief. Qin, I didn't expect that this guy would laugh. What do you mean? Qin, who was about to get up and send him off, became interested when he heard this. You don't know this guy. Zhengbin sighed, took a chicken leg from the dining cart and started to eat it, and said as he ate it, usually in the hotel, he has a stern face all day long, as if someone owes him millions. It's annoying to see him. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 873a. Sudden thought. It seems that Chinese people are really easy to be bullied when they find a job abroad. After sending Zhengbin away, Qin lay on the sofa and recalled what happened just now, feeling a little helpless. Although he didn't want to admit it, in this country dominated by white people, the status of Chinese people is indeed very low. After thinking for a while, Qin took out his mobile phone and called Chen Mu directly. Boss, what's wrong? As soon as the call was connected, Chen Mu's somewhat surprised voice came over. Didn't you want to sleep just now? Why haven't you slept yet? It's like this, aren't we going to recruit people when we open a new store? How do you arrange it? Boss, what do you think? Chen Mu didn't answer directly, but sat up and asked with some doubts. He knew that Qin must have his own ideas when he asked this. Sure enough, there was silence on the other end of the phone for a moment, and Qin said, How do you think this will work? We recruit all Chinese people in our store, how about it? Use all Chinese? Chen Mu shouted in surprise. Yes. Chen Mu's reaction was beyond Qin's expectation. He asked in confusion, What's wrong? Is it not possible? This, Chen Mu hesitated and said, How about this, boss, let's talk about it when we meet later. After hanging up the phone, Qin was a little confused. Why is it not his turn to make the decision on hiring people for his own store? But what is the truth? It is indeed not his turn to make the decision. What did you say? There is such a saying. Staring at Chen Mu and Jefferson in front of him in astonishment, Qin didn't know whether to curse out in his heart. Yes, boss, it is absolutely not okay to hire all Chinese. It will easily cause dissatisfaction among the US government and the people. Jefferson shrugged, with a helpless expression on his face. He never thought that his boss would have such an idea. What a joke. When opening a company in the United States, you actually thought of not hiring Americans. Isn't this giving those politicians and those unions a handle? You know, there are still those lazy guys who complain about the low employment rate in the United States at the door of the White House, and they are all taken away by those foreign immigrants. It's my own company, I can't make the decision myself. Qin pointed at his nose and asked angrily. Of course. Chen Mu nodded and said sincerely, as long as you can suppress the pressure from government departments, the dissatisfaction of the people, and the incitement of the media. This, Qin was speechless. Sometimes, the power of public opinion is so strong that you can't imagine it. Boss, there is no need to do this. Seeing this, Chen Mu took the opportunity to persuade. If we don't use some foreigners, some media may even say that we are racist. If that happens, it will really be over. Okay. Qin waved his hand helplessly. He couldn't afford the big hat of racial discrimination yet. How about this, Brother Chen, when you recruit people, try to control the proportion of foreigners. Don't exceed 20%. 20%? Yes. Qin nodded affirmatively, no more. Okay. Shrugging his shoulders, Chen Mu nodded and agreed. As long as it does not affect the normal operation of the restaurant, he does not care where to recruit people. Boss, it is best that only the three of us know about this. Jefferson reminded him a little worriedly. Don't worry, I'm just talking here. Kinzu nodded and watched the two leave, feeling a little tangled. Why is it so difficult to do something good? After a day of rest in the hotel, Kinzu rushed to Boston accompanied by Chen Mu and Jefferson. Turning his head to look at Kinzu behind him, Chen Mu asked, Boss, shall we go to Chinatown first? Well, you can arrange it. Nodding, Kinzu rubbed his temples and agreed casually. He really didn't have the mind to think about these things now. His young body gave him vigorous energy, but it also made him feel very distressed. Why? It's because his energy is too vigorous. Vigorous energy, which has not been vented for a long time, is easy to get sick. Especially during this period of time, being alone with a young girl every day, but not being able to do anything, it felt like adding fuel to the fire. Last night, when he was lying in bed, he received a call from the hotel promoting takeout, and he almost couldn't help but fall. However, thinking that those people were not sure whether they were clean or not, he finally hung up the phone cruelly. And the direct consequence of this was, when he got up in the morning, he had several pimples on his face. Chen Mu looked at Kinzu with some doubts. He didn't know why the boss's spirit was a little bit off after not seeing him for a night. But he thought it was because of what happened yesterday, so he shook his head and said nothing more. Soon, night the 15th arrived in downtown Boston under Dale's driving. Looking at the time, it was already past 11 o'clock. Kinzu gestured. Let's go to the restaurant to eat something first. Aren't you all hungry? Dale heard this and went to the restaurant without waiting for Chen Mu to speak. Chen Mu shrugged and thought to himself that we are not hungry, only didn't eat in the morning. Arriving at the restaurant, Chen Mu went toward the kitchen to prepare food, while Kinzu and Jefferson sat in the office and chatted. Dale had accompanied Kinzu here many times. After entering the office, she skillfully found a tea set and boiled water to make coffee. Sitting in the boss chair, Kinzu looked at Dale's curvy body because of bending over, and his heart was throbbing again. He quickly turned his head. Boss, it's almost February now, and we can almost prepare the tax filing materials. Jefferson, who was sitting on the sofa next to him, saw that the atmosphere was a little silent, and hurriedly found a topic to talk about. Tax filing. So soon. Kinzu came back to his senses and said with some heartache. Thinking of the tens of millions of dollars that were about to leave him, he felt a pain in his heart. Those were all white, no, green dollars. Yes, it's almost time. Have you found an accounting firm? Jefferson nodded and looked at Kinzu with some envy. It's a shame to compare yourself to others. The taxes they pay in a year are enough to support me for decades of hard work. Not yet, let's talk about it later. Waving his hand, Kinzu said that he didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. Just at this time, Chen Mu pushed the food cart in and said with a smile, Boss, eat something first, the chef is already preparing it. After a simple lunch, Kinzu and his friends took a rest for a while. Chen Mu took out his mobile phone and called the landlord over there, saying with a smile, the landlord has already gone there, let's go too. When Kinzu and his friends arrived at Chinatown and saw the landlord, they were a little stunned. The master is here, the master is here. Chapter 874 The Unexpected Landlord. A colorful macaw fluttered its big wings and flew to Kinzu's shoulder. Before it could stand still, it rubbed its little head against his big face affectionately. Kinzu, who was in a daze, felt his face sticky when the little guy rubbed it. It was still sticky when he touched it. Hey, little guy, what did you eat just now? Seeing the little guy who wanted to rub his shoulder a few more times, Kinzu quickly reached out to stop it. No. Twisting her little head, Heidi struggled and wanted to continue rubbing to express that she had not forgotten her master for so many days. However, for the sake of his own face, Kinzu took the guy down and put him on his arm. Hey, clean, long time no see. Looking at this scene, Haley smoothed her long golden hair, folded her arms in front of her chest, and stared at Kinzu with her eyes that seemed to be rippling with autumn water. This was the first time she accepted things in her father's company. She didn't expect to meet this guy when she met a client for the first time. Could it be that this is the Oriental legend of fated to meet each other even if they are thousands of miles apart? Haley, what did you feed this guy? Without noticing Haley's eyes, Kinzu took the tissue from Dale's hand, wiped the dirt off his face, and glared at the girl helplessly. Here, this. Raising a string of candied haws in her hand, Haley put away her meaningful eyes, and the expression on her face was a little gloating. No way. You actually fed it this? Looking at the half-eaten string of candied haws, Kinzu was a little surprised. He glared at Haley and scolded. How can you feed birds this? Aren't you afraid of choking it? Who said I fed it? Haley pouted a little aggrieved after being scolded by Kinzu, and muttered in dissatisfaction. I just bought it back, and I haven't eaten it yet, but it has been ruined by this guy. Why don't you say anything to it? Hearing her say this, Kinzu quickly took Haley over and tried to put his hand in its throat to see if it swallowed it. Don't worry, it has been eating for a long time. Haley pouted, stepped forward and took Haley, stretched out her white and tender hand to gesture to the side, and said unhappily, Look, it's this house, 3 floors above and below, with a total area of 5,600 square feet. Touching his nose embarrassedly, Kinzu thought to himself that Haley seemed to be mine. Can't I feel sorry for her? However, he seemed to have overlooked a problem. He had obviously robbed someone's pet, but now he thought that someone had robbed his pet. Boss, let's take a look at the store first. Chen Mu, who had been left alone for a long time, saw that the two seemed to be on the verge of another breakdown in the talks, and hurried forward to persuade them. He didn't expect that his boss actually knew someone from this real estate company. Moreover, it seemed that they were not getting along. If he messed up today's work because of this, wouldn't his efforts this month be in vain? Okay, let's take a look at the house first. Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu took the key from Haley and led the way into the house. However, at the moment he took the key, I don't know if it was because of too much energy. Or maybe he wanted to deliberately tease this carefree white rich beauty. When Kinzu took the key, he directly held the other person's white and tender little hand, gently squeezed it in his palm, and then walked towards the house in a swagger. After being stunned for a long time, Haley finally came to her senses when Kinzu and his men opened the door and walked into the house. This bastard, how dare he take advantage of me? Haley stared at the invisible figure with hatred, and was stunned for a while, then gritted her teeth and chased in. However, after entering, looking at Kinzu's half-smiley eyes, Haley stammered for a long time, and didn't know what to say. What's wrong? Kinzu retracted his gaze, put on a smirk on his face, and asked knowingly, Do you want to return Heidi to me? You wish. Haley, who didn't know what to say, quickly stepped back 3 or 4 steps, staring at Kinzu with a vigilant look. Heidi is mine, no one can take her away. Heidi, who was firmly protected by her hands, blinked her eyes in confusion and muttered, Heidi belongs to the master, she belongs to the master. Yes, Heidi is mine. Although Haley knew that this guy was talking about Kinzu, she still pretended not to understand and used her hands to help Heidi tidy up her hair, with a look of intimacy on her face. Heidi seemed to enjoy this touch very much, squinting her eyes gently and muttering, Yes, Heidi belongs to the master, the mistress. Her hands froze, and 2 blushes quickly rose on Haley's face. Without raising her head, she turned around and ran out. Ha, Heidi is right, it's yours. Looking at Haley who was fleeing, Kinzu stood behind her, with his hands folded in front of his chest, and the smile on his face was as brilliant as the blooming flower. Boss, let's look at the house first. Chen Mu touched his head speechlessly. He finally understood his boss's romantic nature. It's okay. Coming back to his senses, Kinzu smiled awkwardly at the 2 middle-aged uncles beside him, and hurriedly continued to look at the house with them. In fact, he came here mainly just for the sake of formality. Kinzu still believed in Chen Mu's vision. When he was at the door, Kinzu looked at this house. It was located in the center of Chinatown. Not far away were several large shopping malls in Chinatown. Whether coming in from the outside or going out from the inside, you have to pass this place. Whether in terms of traffic flow or traffic conditions, this location can be said to be quite good. As long as you take this shop, no matter what business you're in, as long as it is not too niche, you'll definitely make a profit. So, Kinzu just walked around in, looked at the layout of the house, and nodded with satisfaction. Well, Brother Chen made a good choice, this store is very suitable. Chen Mu breathed a sigh of relief, and finally put a smile on his face, and asked, Boss, then this one? Well, this one. Nodding, Kinzu walked downstairs and asked, What did they say about the price? Have you asked? How much is it per square meter? Shaking his head, Chen Mu followed Kinzu's footsteps and said with a bit of a smile, Boss, in the United States, they don't care about selling by square meter. They directly quote the price for the whole house. Chapter 875 Haley's Little Thoughts. Is that so? Kinzu touched his nose, thinking that foreigners are foreigners, even selling a house is different from others. Then tell me, how much is the other party's offer? The price is okay, the total price is $6.8 million US. How much? Kinzu looked up in astonishment, and couldn't believe his ears. Just a 3-story building, it actually cost more than $6 million US. Yes, $6.8 million. Chen Mu nodded, and looked at Kinzu with a bit of a smile. Boss, this price, this location, is really not expensive in Boston. Isn't this expensive? Kinzu couldn't help but be a little surprised when he heard it. According to his visual estimation, the area of the first floor of this building will definitely not exceed 200 square meters. Even if the 3 floors are added together, it will not exceed 600 square meters. In other words, the price of this building is more than $10,000 US per square meter. If converted into RMB, it will be 70,000 or 80,000 per square meter. Perhaps this price is nothing in the big cities over in China. Let alone 70,000 or 80,000, there are houses that cost hundreds of thousands. But where is this place? This is America, a country with vast land and sparse population. Almost no one wants the houses here, but the housing prices are comparable to those in China. Boss, it's really not expensive here. Shrugging, Chen Mu explained helplessly. Don't you see where this is? Although housing prices in the United States are generally very cheap, the prices in some prime locations are also frighteningly expensive. Ah, okay. Seeing that he was about to go out, Kinzu shrugged and stopped talking. It's okay if it's a little more expensive, anyway, he can make it back. However, thinking about the tens of millions of dollars of the price of his 2 previous stores, Kinzu could understand it. Although brand value is very important, housing prices and land prices probably account for a large part of the reason. When he came outside, Kinzu saw Haley's big red Maserati at a glance, smiled, and walked straight over. How about it, do you want it? After seeing Kinzu, Haley, who had regained her composure, leaned against the door of the Maserati with Haley standing on her shoulder, and looked at Kinzu calmly. Yes, she's so beautiful, why not? Seeing this, Kinzu raised his lips slightly and asked back with a smile. It's good to have it, being stared at by Kinzu's eyes with some color, and listening to his words with a hint of ambiguity, Haley, who had just regained her composure, instantly blushed on her jade-like face again. However, this time it was a blush of embarrassment. Being teased by this guy again and again, Haley felt that she was too useless. After giving Kinzu a fierce glare, Haley stamped her feet and said in annoyance, "Do you want the house or not? If not, I'll leave." "Yes, of course." Kinzu couldn't help it any longer, and after a long laugh, he asked, "Did you bring the documents? If you did, we can transfer the money today." "Yes, no." Haley was about to say that she had it with her, but a thought flashed through her mind, and she took back the words that were on her lips. Did you bring it?" Kinzu looked at the girl in confusion, and when he saw the arc on her lips, he suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. "Of course I didn't bring it." With her hands folded in front of her chest, Haley smiled and leaned against the car door with a calm face. "You want to sign the contract before we even agree on the price? Isn't that too fast?" Kinzu's heart skipped a beat. He touched his nose and glanced at Chen Mu. Seeing that he nodded, he asked, "Didn't you guys agree on the price? Why do you want to change your mind now? Have you agreed on the price? How come I didn't know?" Shrugging, Haley looked at Kinzu innocently. "I'm in charge of this project now. If you want a house, you have to talk to me." Kinzu's mouth twitched slightly when he heard this. If he still didn't understand that this girl was deliberately making things difficult for him, then his life would be in vain. Now that he knew her purpose, Kinzu was no longer in a hurry. It was just a house. At worst, he wouldn't buy it. So, Kinzu also came to the side of the Maserati, and imitated Haley, crossing his arms across his chest, leaning against her, and asked with a smile, "Then tell me, how much are you going to sell this house for?" Haley was startled by Kinzu's sudden approach. She suppressed her fear and insisted not to retreat. She raised her head and looked directly at Kinzu. 112 million, not a dollar less. Oh? 112 million. Touching his chin with his hand, Kinzu looked at the blonde in front of him in a fiery red coat with a smile. 112 million is not impossible, but I have a request. What request? Haley was a little stunned. Was he going to agree to it? Why didn't he even bargain? The request is very simple. Kinzu shrugged, pointed at Haley on her shoulder, and said with a smile, "Give it back to me, not to mention 12 million, 20 million is no problem." Impossible. Without thinking, Haley protected the little parrot with her hand and wanted to take a few steps back. But she forgot that she was leaning against the car door, and when she stepped back, she retreated directly into the car. And because she was tripped by the car door, Haley couldn't sit still in the seat, and she lay on her back on the red leather seat. The most important thing was that Kinzu was very close to her, and he was startled when he saw this, and subconsciously reached out to pull her. But I don't know if it was intentional or not, but he did pull her, but the place where his hand was holding was not right. Why is it a little soft? Kinzu, who felt something was wrong, subconsciously pinched it twice. Kinzu. A gnashing voice suddenly sounded in Kinzu's ears. Hearing the murderous aura contained in the voice, Kinzu's neck couldn't help but shrink, and he took his hand back a little embarrassedly. Well, misunderstanding, Haley, it's really a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Haley put the little parrot in her hand on the co-pilot, moved up from the seat with difficulty, straightened the wrinkled clothes on her chest, and stared at Kinzu with shame and anger. "I'm going to kill you." With a cry, a strange scene suddenly appeared in Boston's Chinatown. A young man in a neat suit and a black coat was running in front in a somewhat embarrassed manner. Behind him, a blonde girl wearing a bright red coat, bright red leather pants, and a pair of bright red high boots on her feet was chasing closely behind. And next to this woman, there was a colorful little parrot flying. This is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that while the little parrot was flying, it was also shouting, "No, no, the male and female owners are fighting, come and help. Fin DS capture much as great as Pelaga hasta el final. No se olviden all like busgasms contenido exclusivo y exeo inmediato. Si escribete nuestro Patreon. Recuerda, cada like, si escribes no dona que nos anima a continuar. Gracias a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.